Good evening. I'd like to call this evening's planning board meeting to order. First item on the agenda this evening is review and approve the minutes of the March 5th, 2026 meeting. Has everyone had the opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
Any questions, comments, concerns?
No.
If not, can I get a motion? Ooh,
Just,
sure.
just one on the top of page 5, the last page of the minutes. Believe, Perna made a motion to continue one of the hearings, and the date should be to April 2nd, 2026.
Okay. With that change, is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
As changed?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. All right, so we'll make note.
Steve will be joining it.
Okay. 3 minutes.
He said this.
Okay. So we will make note of that change on the minutes. Next item is to review and sign bills. Do we have any bills? In my pile of stuff here? Yes, okay. Number of bills to approve this evening. First one is for Bowman for 335 Maple Ave. This is a site plan peer review in the amount of $14,685. Bowman for 335 Maple Ave, TIS and site plan peer review in the amount of $1,815. Bowman's for 525 Hartford Turnpike. This is, again, site plan peer review in the amount of $2,121. Graves Engineering for 335 Maple Ave in the amount of $407.75. Graves Engineering for 335 Maple Ave, the mixed-use component, in the amount of $3,592.14. Graves Engineering for 525 Hartford Turnpike in the amount of $5,335.68. Bowman for 308 and 312 Boston Turnpike in the amount of $3,825. Bowman for 308, 312 Boston Turnpike in the amount of $1,665. And excuse me, Graves Engineering for 308 and 312 Boston Turnpike in the amount of $871.50, totaling $38,318.07. Any questions or comments or concerns on these bills?
No question, Chair.
Okay, can I please get a motion to approve and sign these bills?
I move that we approve the bills as read by the chair.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Wonderful. Next item, board member comments this evening. Matt, anything?
No, none at this time.
Dino?
No comments.
Arno?
No comment, Chair.
Tim?
No comments.
And I am all set for this evening. Staff report.
I do have a few items to report on. So first up, our 15 Maple Ave reuse kind of evaluation and community workshop. The board will recall we sent out a survey to residents looking to understand some potential reuse options and what the community vision for the reuse of that property is. That survey has seen 1,017 responses as of this evening, which far surpasses our original record in the office of 80 responses. So we're very excited about that. I just want to thank all the residents that have participated to date.
What's the general consensus for that?
There's a lot to unpack there, and we'll give the a more updated report to the board on that. But largely, top three uses are parking, open space, particularly related to middle school aged children, and landscaping opportunities, so green space and that. So we'll be looking at kind of reviewing that, and again, there's a lot more to unpack there. We had questions about paid parking, things like that, so a lot to unpack. In addition to the survey, we conducted a community workshop in person last Tuesday, which was pretty well attended. We had a lot of great conversation with residents that came out to that and ran a number of exercises with them related to planning and kind of developing a collaborative vision with neighbors and other residents. And so had a lot of good conversation there as well. We will be having that same workshop again for those who were unable to attend the first one. That will be on April 14th at 6:30 p.m. in the Council on Aging Senior Center, just across the parking lot here. So again, if you weren't able to make that first workshop, that's a second opportunity. We hope to see people there for that. In addition to that, we've selected a consultant for our master plan update. The recipient of that RFP was Barrett Planning Group in association with Kimley Horn. We've done work with both of those firms in the past. They're very well equipped to do this type of work and have done that with numerous communities. They have a strong record of master plan projects under their belt. And they're geared towards a lot of the work that we think is going to be important towards the community and setting that 20-year vision. So we'll be scheduling a kickoff meeting with that consultant, with staff, and likely with some of the relevant boards as well. So that will start to tick up. I will have an outline of more specific timeline of events and what to expect once we've had that kickoff meeting with the consultant to develop that further. So more to come on that front, but that is underway as of today. So
Great. Thank you very much.
absolutely.
All right, on to meetings and hearings. First item this evening is proposed bank and parking site plan approval and special permit. This is the Baroni Trust. This is a new public hearing.
I'll read the legal notice. The Shrewsbury Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday evening, April 2nd, 2026 at 7 p.m. in the Select Board's hearing room at the Richard D. Carney Municipal Office Building, 100 Maple Avenue, to hear the application of Garrett Horsfall, 0 Campanelli Drive, Braintree, Mass. 02184, as required by the Town of Shrewsbury zoning bylaw, Section 7F37, for a site plan modification by the Planning Board to allow for the demolition of a 2,403 square feet building and the construction of a 2,883 square feet commercial building with associated parking. The proposed site plan is shown on a plan accompanied by the application titled, quote, Site Development Plan for 67 to 77 and 87 to 97 and 103 Boston Turnpike and 21 Dewey Road, end quote, prepared by Kelly Engineering Group, 0 Campanelli Drive, Braintree, Mass. 02184, dated March 2nd, 2026, and stamped by Brandon Lee, P.E., and Stephen Horsfall, PLS. The subject project is located at 67 to 77 and 87 to 97 and 103 Boston Turnpike and 21 Dewey Road, northerly of Boston Turnpike and west of Dewey Road, and consists in whole or in part of Shrewsbury Assessor's Tax Plate 31, Plot 216000. A copy of the application and plans may be seen in the Office of the Planning and Economic Development Department at the Richard D. Carney Municipal Office Building, 100 Maple Avenue, Shrewsbury, Mass., and on the Planning Board website at www.shrewsburyma.gov/ongoing projects.
Welcome.
Good evening, Garrett Horsfall with Kelly Engineering Group, civil site engineer for the project. Also with me tonight is Sonia Katzen, who is representing property ownership. Her father, Josh, passes on his condolences for not being here tonight due to the Passover holiday. Also is Giovanni Caesar from Stonefield Engineering, representing the proposed tenant, Chase Bank, for this project. So the existing parcel is about 9.2 acre parcel, or a combination of various parcels that have been combined into common ownership over the years in the commercial business zone, about 9.2 acres in total. We've been in front of this board various times over the last few years for various parking expansions and improvements over the plaza as it changes tenants and evolves throughout the years. Most recently, we did the parking expansion that was in conjunction with the Housing Authority land out the back. which really helped to alleviate some parking issues with Trader Joe's and Total Wine towards the rear of the site. Right now, we have 3 curb cuts along Route 9. There's a main central curb cut down here, and there's also 2 other curb cuts near the Verizon store. And there's also 2 curb cuts onto Dewey Road for access into the plaza overall. More recently, the owner of the plaza has gotten an agreement to purchase 103 Boston Turnpike, which houses the Peroni Barber Shop and the Shrewsbury Tailor Shop as well. It's about a 700 acre piece. This would be merged into the overall plaza lot upon approvals from the town. And for those purposes and zoning purposes, it's been reviewed as one parcel as we've historically reviewed this piece of land previously. Right now, there's a lot line splitting this from the abutter at 115. There's a curb cut here with a sort of a shared driveway to the back. Currently today, there's a dead end parking aisle here to access the barber shop. Even though it's on their property, they most likely use that as parking for their facilities today. And you'll note that the existing setbacks of the building are, quite close to the setback lines. We are in front of the ZBA for relief to continue those existing setbacks, which I will show in the proposed plan now, which is about a 2,880 square foot Chase Bank facility. This bank will not have a drive-through facility. Chase's new program, or for this site at least, is they want to be up front on the street and visual sort of in parking in the rear, which kind of actually flows well with this neighborhood in general. You have the Whole Foods down the street that's right up on the street as well as the other businesses in this area. We've proposed about 22 parking spaces in front of the bank. This actually provides now full circulation, so cleans up the dead end aisle that was there previously. We've held the front setback along here, and then the side setback along here. Again, we're getting special permit relief. We were there Monday night. We did get continued, so we know we aren't going to get a closeout tonight from this board. And we hope to get the closeout of the ZBA at the next hearing, and understand we're getting a continuance tonight from this board for that matter. We are also providing a new stormwater management system in compliance, obviously with the town stormwater management standards as well as the state standards for redevelopment. We are picking up all of this runoff to this pavement here for infiltration, water quality device, and overflowing into the design point. There's an existing catch basin at this side of the parking lot of the design point. I know there was some abutter comments in regard to stormwater management in a letter via the ZBA. We did submit an updated stormwater plan due to a couple of changes in the plans which we resubmitted last week, which previously we were going to remove some of this driveway, and at the request for the abutter to keep that driveway active, as well as a Chase request to have a pedestrian or hard surface connection out to the road. We've reintroduced impervious surface here, and as such, an additional chamber was added to the subsurface system to properly mitigate the stormwater flow. Regardless, it provides the dedicated recharge volume as required under the town standards, as well as applicable water quality components here as well. We have submitted a lighting plan for this project. It's all downward facing modern LED lighting. There is some brighter lights in front of the bank, primarily for security purpose reasons, for people doing transactions, et cetera, leaving from the bank maybe at night. MDM, transportation consultants did provide a traffic report for this project. Minimal traffic impacts, approximately you have 15 additional trips during the weekday peak, 26 additional during the weekday evening, and 32 additional trips in the Saturday midday peak hour. So very minimal, about a couple cars, one car every couple minutes or so that's generated from this site as a previous condition here. And overall impervious coverage on the site, it stays just about the same. It's a slight increase of about 600 square feet of impervious, but we are providing a significant stormwater management improvements in an area of the site that currently has none today. And with that, I would just want to go over quickly the elevations just to give the board a perspective of what this may look like from the street here. So this is the view if you were in the parking lot that was previously here, the front entrance, glass facade. This would be the facade along Route 9 that you would see, sort of a glass window facade here as well. And then this is the side of the storefront from that shared driveway section. And this would be if you were coming From Worcester, headed east on Route 9, you would see this glass side facade heading that direction. Glad to answer any questions the board may have on this project, or for the public for that matter, and look forward to hearing any comments or questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I'll open it up to the members of the board for any questions or comments. Matt, do you have anything?
No comments.
Dino?
Not now.
Verna?
Would it be a regular full-fledged teller type of bank, or would it be more like there's a Fidelity in the Staples Plaza which cater to different type of needs? I was wondering what category this would be falling into.
I think there will be a teller position, but there'll also be some consultation booths similar to, I think, Fidelity. If members on the floor plans, there's a teller position and an ATM, I believe, in the first vestibule. So it kind of has some financing options as well as the teller general transactions as you see at a normal bank.
So the traffic would be getting I mean, the customers who visit would get into this through the existing driveway that gets into the plaza, right?
Correct. The main driveway would be that right in, right out that exists today.
And then there would be one from the Dewey Street side?
If you continue north on Dewey, there's you're not supposed to sort of turn in on that first one. There's a full access driveway that was, I think, installed several years ago when we did that parking lot expansion back there.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Tim, do you have anything?
Yeah, sad to see Peroni's go, but the bank looks like a good use for the site. Is Mr. Lechner satisfied now with the stormwater and the distance that was corrected between the buildings, 103 and 115?
So to our
I'm not
knowledge,
sure if he's here, but
there was an issue with the legal representation, so we have not had consultation with Mr. Lechner because he's involved with the transactional side of the Peroni Barbershop as well. We have sent a revised letter back to the abutter that was, I believe, sent to Chris and staff yesterday from the property owner here. We have updated that building location on the abutting lot. The stormwater, to my knowledge, is fully designed properly. We've added there's a couple.
it's an improvement, actually, over what's existing now.
Correct.
Yeah.
We've accounted for if it does get into there, that is actually being routed properly through the whole stormwater management system and properly mitigated.
Right. So would JP Fadul have any reason to oppose? Mr. Lechner seemed to indicate that, he should be satisfied, I think, based on what's been presented.
I just have this as an update right now, this letter. Like I said, we've written this, I don't know if you have it in your files, you may or may not, but there was a letter of response back. We believe we've satisfied them, and we're looking to work collaboratively here. We're not trying to.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, we're not trying to get in the way or anything, and just trying to have a neighborly discussion of be friendly neighbors, honestly.
Agreed, and it looks appropriate, everything. Thank you.
Steve, do you have anything? Steve?
He's probably muted.
I don't know if you can hear us. Maybe that's something we can try and troubleshoot. But I did have a couple of questions for you. So I did see the storefront is, let's take a step back. What is this project, what is the zoning that this is going in under? Is this the
Commercial.
underlying?
Yes, the underline. We're not applying under the overlay.
Okay, all right, that, I understand that. The storefront is facing inward into the plaza. Was there, or is there any potential for considering, I know, as you had just suggested, that this is not being submitted under the overlay, but we are still trying to see if there's some potential ways of activating the street level. And I appreciate the glass facade along Route 9. I'm just wondering if there's any potential of looking at having a storefront on that side, or
In terms of a main entry,
of some type of entrance, yeah.
pedestrian entry. This has been reviewed and approved by the powers that be at Chase, so we'd have to go back through those channels and review that, but we can certainly ask them. I know we're not getting an approval tonight, so we can certainly respond back to you at your next hearing if that is available. But I believe due to the layout and security purposes of the bank, sort of back of houses behind the wall, and they want to limit the interaction of amount of doors, I assume. But we can certainly look into it and follow up and see if that's an option to provide a secondary entrance on that side of the street.
Yeah, it's just something that I'd be interested in hearing about. In the event, or even actually in addition to, if that's an option, I think that would be great. But also, I think the potential of kind of enhancing some of the circulation around the building by way of potentially adding sidewalk access from the left side of the building out onto the sidewalk on Route 9, so that anyone that is walking along that street doesn't need to necessarily tread through the grass area.
No, I do agree with that. That's a fair, and I think that's a more appropriate place, quite honestly, than over there. This was just the requested location, but we can certainly add both connections to the plaza.
Okay. And then circulation wise, generally over in that area is tough for anyone that might be trying to get to either side of the plaza. And I'm just wondering if there is a potential of looking at some signage to kind of help direct people, not just within this area, but within really the entire plaza. That intersection that this building is right next to, the intersection of entering into the plaza, is a little dicey at times. So I'm just wondering if there's some potential way of doing some enhancements there that can further help customers that are going to Chase, but also those others that are kind of doing business within the plaza. Do you catch the intersection I'm speaking of?
Yeah, it's the
It's the entrance.
This main central.
Yep, right there.
And we can look to see if, we can consult with one of our traffic consultants as well for the project, see if we can add a stop sign in one of these directions if it makes sense to help better flow here and just eliminate some of the conflict that you as a resident might experience and, other visitors to the town.
And then also, I did see that it looks as if there is a little bit of an expanded or enhanced landscape section on the outer edge of the lot. And I'm just wondering if there is, are there tree plantings that are proposed there, or is it just green space?
So right now, we're going to maintain all of these existing trees through here, and Chase has sort of a specific landscaping program, which has yet to be developed just because they want to get the permit first, and if needed, they have like more seasonal style plantings at the front of the building. We can certainly review that final planting plan with staff or have it further developed as we progress this permitting process, just to establish more shrubbery and some seasonal color on that side of the building, if that's how the board would like to see this.
Sure. Okay. I think those were the primary questions that I had. Chris, do you have anything that you'd like to add to this?
No, I think that sums it up. So, again, they're currently before ZBA, as they mentioned, looking for a continuance. The ZBA would wrap up their process likely at their next meeting, and planning board would then follow suit. So, keeping the hearing open allows us to collect information during that time as well. So, notably, the stormwater. If the board would like that to go out to peer review, we can send that out to Graves as well for peer review.
Okay. Knowing that there are still some outstanding questions, I don't know if other members of the board are in agreement, but I think it might be worthwhile to have that, just have Graves take a once over at it.
Yep.
Okay. This is a public hearing. Is there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item this evening? Yes, sir. Please step up, state your name.
My name is Paul Bro, and along with my wife Mary, who's in the back, we represent J.P. Fadul Company at 115 Boston Turnpike. We are the sole direct abutter to the property. We have owned our property since 1965, and during that entire time, the Peronis have been our friendly neighbor. The Peronis have decided to sell their property, and so we wish to welcome Chase Bank as a new neighbor. However, we want to do so in a way that we are not disadvantaged during the transition. Therefore, I spoke at the meeting Monday night for the zoning board, and as was just alluded to, Mr. Katzen sent a letter responding or attempting to respond to some of the comments that I made, and I'll go over that in a minute. I would just point out an observation I had from the zoning board meeting. There was a couple, a husband and wife team, who were adding a family room to their residence. It seemed like a very straightforward matter. But what they did is the woman went around the neighborhood and actually went over the plans that her and her husband were attempting to present to the board this past Monday, and got each of the neighbors to sign off that they were not opposed to the plans that were being presented. I think with that type of good communication, we would have avoided highlighting errors on the site plan and the drainage plan that were originally filed in this application. Having said that, we thank Mr. Katzen for his letter, and what I'd like to do is to go over the points in the letter so that we're all up to speed on where things stand. So I'm referencing the letter that was sent to the J.P. Fadul Company dated March 31st, and a copy has been given to each of the board members. So if I start with number 1, plan accuracy, again, we thank Mr. Katzen for his acknowledgement of the errors in the original site plan and the stormwater maintenance plan, and note that these were not merely a property line dispute, but rather a material error. And I'd point out that that property line difference meant that in the stormwater drainage plan that was amended, the holding number of tanks went from 6 to 7. That had a material effect because that additional stormwater probably would have wound up in our basement. So would have had a serious adverse effect. As we look at the second item, stormwater drainage, in the first paragraph, Mr. Katzen is saying that this board will carefully review the stormwater drainage plan. I am not an engineer. I found the blatant error, but I would ask you, along with Mr. Katzen, to take a careful look to be sure that all bases are covered. Now that our runoff from our property is included in the plan, we've made that hopeful point clear. But if there are any other items that the board sees, we'd like that corrected as well. In the second paragraph, on item number 2. We have what we call a holding tank issue. There is, to my tribal knowledge, a holding tank that was placed in the ground by the Peronis years ago that sits at the low point as described in the drainage plan. Exactly where, I'm not totally sure, and I believe no one else is either. And I assume from the letter from Mr. Katzen that a permit was not pulled by the Peronis at the time because it appears he is checked. The sole purpose is not to include it in the plan. That was not my comment at the zoning board meeting. It is to raise the issue, is it in the way of the current drainage plan? I don't know that answer. What I believe to be true is that it rests partially on the Peroni property and partially on our property. Again, I have no specific knowledge of that, but I believe that to be true. What I do know to be true is our drainage is tapped into that underground tank, as is the Peroni's rain drainage off the roof. So our gutters are tapped into that underground, and so are the Peronis. We are simply asking that if that rests in the way, and part of it is on our property, that the applicant seek written permission to come on our property. And again, as I said at the board meeting Monday night, it would seem to be common sense, but I can point to a number of issues where the applicant has been on our property without permission and done some serious things that involved prior litigation. So there's a past history going back many years, as in paving the access road in the back of our property. So that's all we're asking, is that it be pointed out. I also don't know, in light of what was being said, if the town would like that out of there. That's up to you. I don't know if you want it out, if it doesn't have a permit. I don't know if it's in the way. If it's not in the way, it's been stated that it would stay in the ground, and that's perfectly fine. Item 3, construction work hours. It's stated in the letter that the hours would be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 6 days a week. We would request the board to change that because we are of mixed zoning. Our building is a little bit unique. The bottom level is zoned commercial. The top level is zoned residential and contains an apartment that we rent out. The space between buildings is less than 20 feet. It's 17 and a half. Therefore, the noise of the deconstruction and the reconstruction could have a significant effect. We'd like it to be limited to business hours, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, if possible. So we make that request to the board. Number 4, drilling on your property. I pointed out at the zoning board meeting that the soil samples that were taken from our side of the driveway. And so holes were drilled on our property very recently. He's saying it was a mistake. There seems to be a pattern of mistakes, but that's why we point it out. Those holes have since been filled in, so. Notices, the question is the email address proper? And I will acknowledge that it is proper. As we go over to number 6, waivers, there's some confusion in the statement in the letter. As it applies to this board, I reviewed the application again. There are no waivers requested of this board. Of the zoning board, every single waiver was checked off and is still checked off as of today. So when it says they have been withdrawn, that's a zoning board, yes, a zoning board issue, and we'll take that up with them, but there are no waivers that we are aware of pending before this board. So to clarify that. The estimated completion date is something that was brought up by me at the zoning board, and I appreciate the response that was given by Mr. Katzen. We would also ask that the board consider a temporary construction fence be put up between the property so that the construction debris does not wind up on our property. We don't have a spacious property, and we'd like to not have that debris come into our area, potential for everything to create flat tires and everything else. So we'd ask that the potential for a temporary construction fence be considered. And with that, I would thank you for listening and thank you for your time.
Great, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item this evening? Okay, seeing none, I would like to entertain, this is going to be continued to the next hearing. So at this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to the May 7th meeting.
I make the motion to continue it, May 7th.
Is-
Say.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I think now that we have Steve, we have to do this by roll calls.
Yep.
Sorry.
So Matt,
Aye.
Dino,
Yes.
Perna,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
and I am a yes. Thank you very much. We'll see you on May 7th. Okay. Before we go on to the next public hearing, I would be remiss if I did not just give notice to those in attendance this evening that we have received a request to continue 525 Hartford Turnpike. So once we get to that portion of the meeting this evening, that will be continued to next month's meeting on May 7th. So just if you are here for that, please note that there will be no discussion on that particular item this evening. Next item, 2 proposed commercial buildings, site plan approval and special permit for 223 Hartford Legacy LLC. This is a continued public hearing for 223 Hartford Turnpike.
Good evening. Good evening to the chair and members of the board. By way of introduction, again, I'm Richard Ricker. I'm an attorney representing 223 Hartford Legacy LLC. My offices are at 11 Maple Avenue. With us here tonight is Anthony Rich, who is the principal of the LLC. He's to my far right, and John Grenier from J.M. Grenier Associates is our engineer of record for this particular building project. As you recall, we were here last month. We had Ali Khorasani with us, the traffic engineer who spoke about the traffic, and I believe, and my recollection is that he detailed the minor change in the traffic flow that he expected in this redevelopment of this site, that being a negative finding relative to any increase. In fact, it would be a decrease. The issues, as I recall it, were that we needed to review were the curb cut and the truck turning off of Route 20 and onto Route 20. And we were hoping to get a definitive statement from DOT relative to a permit. We've had, Ali Corsani has had communications and conversations with DOT that we're privy to. And based on those, we expect that there would not be any DOT permit necessary for a curb cut here because we're utilizing the existing curb cut and not adding anything in by way of the neighbor. The only concern that was addressed to us that I saw, John can correct me if I'm wrong, but was whether or not there was a neighbor also using the curb cut, which is not the case. With that, John, maybe, I think there was some discussion relative to Graves Engineering as well, and John can address the curb cut and truck turn.
Yeah, so we did have comments from Graves Engineering, which we supplied revised plans and comments back to Graves Engineering. Some of it was technical in nature, just making sure with the existing pad, there are grindings out there. There is some compacted dirt, not necessarily fully impervious pavement. So in the pre-development, we did model that as being a little more or little less impervious. It still didn't make any difference in our drainage. All of our drainage is subsurface, and we have plenty of volume to reduce the amount of runoff from pre-development to post-development. The other question, going back to traffic and circulation, was making sure that emergency vehicles or commercial vehicles coming into the site and out of the site wouldn't have to cross over into other lanes, both going out of the site heading west or coming into the site heading west. So we did make a minor modification to the building that's on, I'll call it pad 1, the one that's closest to Route 20. We have a landscape island that's in front of the building that separates the driving aisle from the parking area. We shifted that landscape island a little further back so that when vehicles turn into the site, they have more ability to turn in and then make the maneuver to go left down the existing driveway. So we gave them a little bit more freeboard to pull in and maneuver. We did provide some truck turning analysis, both for an emergency vehicle and for a WB-40, which that's on a regular basis, that would be one of the larger vehicles going into the site. To do a WB-65, which is a big, long tractor trailer, that is not something that would come into the site on any regular basis. But it can get into the site. It would just have to maneuver into some of the other lanes a little bit. But again, that's not something that would go into the site on any regular basis. It would be on a rare occasion, as a matter of fact. So we did do those analyses for like I said, emergency vehicles and truck traffic that would come in and out of the site. We did address some of the minor technical stormwater items, which it was more, I'll consider it I-dotting and T-crossing. I'm just going through our letter right now. That was really about it. There was nothing of any significance that would have changed anything else on the site plans. The biggest change physically was just shifting that, like I said, that landscape island back, just to give any vehicles coming in and out a little bit more leeway to pull in and out and not have to cross any traffic lanes pulling in and out of the site. I don't know. I did try to get a hold of Jeff Walsh at Graves a couple times to see if they had completed a confirmatory letter, but we feel comfortable that their items are addressed. It really wasn't a lot of heavy lifting. There weren't any big changes that they were looking for as part of their comment. So we feel comfortable that all those items are covered. I think that's about it. Anything else?
Well, I think we've noted in the, bless you.
Thank you.
We've noted in the request and for the waivers, we've noted in your paperwork the reasons for our waivers, mostly based on topographical issues and the shape of the lot at this site. As you know, there is a slope at the Route 20, along Route 20 on the frontage, and that slope, it's an easement, it's a state easement, 20 feet in width, and we feel that it would not be in anybody's interest for us to be disturbing that easement for any reason. And other than that, I mean, we think this is a terrific redevelopment of this particular site. We really do. And one other waiver that I wanted to address was the pedestrian, continuous pedestrian walk way. This site would not be amenable to that at all. The proposed tenant is such that there will be machines out there, they'll be moving things around, and a walkway would just get in the way, really, of the good maneuverability around the buildings. So we're asking that you consider those waivers as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Just open it up to the board. Any questions, comments, concerns? Matt?
None at this time.
Dino?
Not this time.
Verna?
Just one quick question. In your discussions with Mass DOT on any permits, was there any discussion of the right in, right out versus, I don't know, all different types of turnings, whether they would, even though there may not be a need for permit, whether they would either provide any guidance on that or whether they would restrict any type of turnings?
No, there wasn't. And as a matter of fact, as you know, this whole corridor of Route 20 has been improved. And with the improvements that were made with all of the lanes and the striping, they do have a dedicated left turn lane on Route 20 going from west to east to turn into this site. So where this use will have less big truck traffic, because as you know, this has been a storage yard for tractor trailers, and then there's also the Prax Air. There's going to be less large truck traffic into the site, and we're going to just maintain the existing, obviously, Route 20 traffic patterns, existing turning lanes. We're not touching the curb cut or adding any curbing or modifying anything within the right-of-way. So, again, to what Richard said, and with the discussions with DOT, we don't believe that there's going to be a need for any curb cut, because we're not modifying the existing curb cut. And if anything, it's going to be smaller vehicles in general and less traffic with the current use.
Thank you.
Tim?
Just a couple questions. It certainly is a good use for the site. On the turning analysis, I think it was with the one that showed the ladder truck. What does the green line indicate?
There's the alignment for the tires, but then, as you know, with a fire truck, they have a big overhang on the back, so that's also
Swing?
includes the swing for the rear end of the truck beyond where the tires are.
Okay. And in the traffic report, the issue was if there was a long trailer, I think you referenced the 65, that was traveling eastbound that wanted to turn left, and another 65 that wanted to exit or leave the parcel and turn right to go westbound. That was the problem.
That
correct?
was the biggest problem was having, because where the driveway is now, it goes at that odd, sharp angle off the site, which heads over towards Prax Air. So to use that tight turn, you have to take a sharp, to get out of the site and head west, you have to take
Right.
a sharp right turn. That would be where the problem would lie. And that's why where the first building pad is, we pushed that landscape island further back into the site and made that section of driving aisle wider so that vehicles can take a wider turn.
Does that solve the problem, even though it would be on a rare occasion?
They would have to, if with a W, you can't do that with a WB 65 in any instance. You'd have to go into there's 2 lanes, there's 2
Yeah.
westbound lanes.
Yeah.
They would have to use the one closer to the center line, the left side of the westbound lane.
So it still could be an issue, even though rare.
Well, yeah, and it would be an issue if, with larger vehicles going in, if they were pulling out of most of the other sites on Route 20. If you have a really large vehicle, they're gonna have to time it and use the second lane. They can't pull into a single lane tight on that side. But again, we don't anticipate any of those larger trucks on any type of regular basis, so.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? No? Steve, do you have anything?
No, I hear what John is saying. I think he's right. This was an old truck terminal that had been most recently used by a carrier who was, I believe, dealing with CSX. So
Correct.
I think that the new use is a good use. I'd like to see more of these types of uses on Route 20, and it would certainly be more beneficial from a traffic standpoint. So I'm good with this.
Okay. All right, great. As this is a public hearing, are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this evening? Chris, is there anything from the town side?
No, so I defer to the board if they want the definitive from Graves, confirmatory letter, and from MassDOT, or if the representations I think are fairly accurate from the applicants, if those are sufficient. In either way, we're prepared to move forward with the draft decision if the board is so inclined.
I think it would be helpful to get the letter from Graves, but I don't think that should in any way hold up closing this hearing if others are in agreement with that.
Yes.
Agreed.
We could always add a condition if,
I was gonna
something
suggest that.
breaks and messed out roads.
Yep.
We're under some considerable pressure because we have a national tenant, and they're pushing for us to move here, so
Sure.
whatever we can do,
No.
we're happy to. If we can have a condition, that's fine.
Okay. So, at this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to close this public hearing this evening.
I make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second?
Matt?
In favor, yes.
Dino?
Yes.
Erna?
Yes.
Yes,
Steve?
Yes?
And I am a yes, so this public hearing is closed. So we will plan to have a decision at next month's.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah. Next item on the agenda, proposed mixed-use development, site plan approval and special permit. This is the Virginia K. Luke Irrevocable Trust. This is a continued public hearing for 525 Hartford Turnpike. As I mentioned previously, there is a motion there has been a request to continue this public hearing to the May 7th meeting. So at this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to continue the public hearing on 525 Hartford Turnpike until the May 7th meeting. Is there a motion?
Make a motion.
Is there a second? All those in favor, Matt?
Aye.
Dino? Erna?
Yes.
Tim?
yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I am a yes. That will be continued to the May 7th meeting. Next item on the agenda is the proposed commercial development site plan approval for Spectacular LLC. This is a continued public hearing for 335 Maple Ave. Also, I think just as you're here for both, the other one is for the proposed mixed-use development, site plan approval and special permit. So,
Good evening, Madam Chair.
welcome.
For the record, Mark Borenstein, I'm an attorney at the law firm Prince Lavelle in Worcester, representing the applicant. This evening, I'm joined by Sam Adams of Spectacular LLC, the applicant, or owner of the applicant, Bob Michaud of MDM Transportation Consultants, and Tim Hayes of Buller Engineering. Trying to join the Google Meet to share my screen. So while we're working through that, just to provide an overview for the board, since the last meeting, we've been working with staff to further refine this project. We've received peer review comments from Graves Engineering and Bowman with respect to traffic and civil. This evening we'll spend a decent amount of time discussing the peer review comments, Bob will, and then separately we'll provide an overview over the refinements that have made to the layout since the last meeting. So with that, I'm gonna get the slide deck for Bob so he can present his presentation with respect to the peer review comments. So let me just do that. So bear with me here for a second. Continue to share. All right, is that good?
It's good.
All right.
So thank you again, Bob Michaud with MDM Transportation Consultants. What I'd like to do is, rather than presenting a point-by-point discussion of peer review, is really to provide to the board a general overview of the project, its traffic impact, and weaving into that discussion elements of some recent analysis that we've provided in response to the peer review. In addition to the traffic component, there have been a series of adjustments to the site plan itself. Roughly half of the peer review commentary really had to do with site access and circulation. So that'll be the other component that I cover. So I'll have, I guess.
You want to take care of it?
I think I'll
Yeah.
control that.
Just do the arrows.
Wonderful. All right. So as the board is aware, the traffic impact and access study that we've prepared to industry standards looked at a series of intersections that serve as gateways to this particular site, and they include a number of signalized locations along the Route 9 corridor, from Harrington Avenue all the way to Lake Street, and then in between there at Oak, which is really at the foot of the development, as well as Maple Avenue. On the local street side, we've studied a series of locations along Oak Street all the way up to Maple Avenue, as well as the Old Mill intersection. And I think there's concurrence with the peer review that those selected locations are appropriate in the context of the likely impact of the project. For context, the board is also aware that while we're showing this as a single site, it really comprises two separate lots that are being permitted as separate lots, and that's distinguished on this aerial diagram that you can see here. But for context of the combined impact of the project, we've submitted the study that shows that combined impact. I'll begin by saying that the traffic study, and this speaks to some of the commentary that we heard through public input as well as through peer review, really what we've done is presented a conservative basis in the study in which to analyze the impact of the change in volume from the project. And the conservative traffic assumptions that we used began with the use of October 2025 data, which is a time of year when traffic volumes along the Route 9 corridor in this area generally are above average. Though they're above average, we didn't reduce those to so-called average conditions. So we're using a slightly elevated basis to begin with. We've also applied a growth standard along the corridor that actually exceeds historical standards for the arterials in Shrewsbury, Route 9 and Route 20. We know that having extensive discussions with Mass DOT that We've actually most recently been instructed by DOT to use a 1/4% annualized growth rate when looking at the longer-term growth trends for projects in this area. Notwithstanding that, we've actually used a 1% annualized growth rate over a 7-year period. And in addition to that, have considered 5 specific development projects, some of which are located directly along the Route 9 corridor, such as Centec Park North, for instance, the Point at Hills Farm, that's on the Route 20 side, the proposed auto dealership that was at least at one point proposed. I don't know that it'll get built, but that's at 701 Boston Turnpike. And in addition to those, also considered the potential impacts associated with the Beale School redevelopment along Maple Avenue and the residential / mixed use development at 308, 312 Boston Turnpike. So really, all of those assumptions were identified in initial consultation with the planning department, but we've augmented since the initial traffic study, the 2 additional developments, Beale and the residential project, 308 to 312, to make sure that we've been comprehensively including everything that should be included. So that combination of assumptions really results in what we believe is a slightly conservative basis for analysis. And some of these actually do address some of the peer review commentary, the inclusion, for instance, or consideration of Beale in that other project, and whether or not any further adjustment to baseline traffic volumes would be necessary, which we don't believe is the case. As it relates to the project itself, we've applied industry standard methods to estimate traffic for the various uses. A significant number of the uses, particularly the ones that front Route 9, as commercial entities, will really rely substantially on pass-by traffic along the Route 9 corridor. We anticipate that somewhere between 30 and 35%, or about a third of the traffic that would be generated by the commercial components of the project would actually not be new traffic. It would be traffic that, as a matter of convenience and direct access, would draw from existing traffic stream. And as a result, there's a very high orientation of trips to or from the Route 9 corridor as opposed to local street systems. New trips, those that are not passed by, we expect 60% of those to come along the Route 9 corridor, not from local streets, but from Route 9 itself, from more distant locations. And when combined with the pass-by, really almost 90% of the traffic for this project is going to be oriented to the Route 9 corridor. The Route 9 corridor, even though that is going to be a substantial reliance on access, will, and I'll present this in more detail in a moment, will result in about a 5% change in travel along the Route 9 corridor. And that amount of traffic will be distributed fairly equally among the various driveways that are serving the property. There's a lot of numbers on this table. This is the trip generation table that has been updated to reflect commentary by peer review to make sure that we've properly accounted for each of the elements of the project. In particular, the original traffic report estimated trips for a bank use on one of the pads at 2,400 square feet. It was actually 4,800 square feet. We've made that adjustment. And ultimately, when we apply industry standards and we take the pass-by factor that I mentioned earlier, 32 to 35% of trips, what we're really talking about is a project that in its entirety will be generating about 200 directional trips per hour, either in or out of the development during weekday morning peak hours or evening peak hours, and slightly higher on a Saturday midday period, right? About 300 total trips, either coming into the development or leaving. And those combination of trips will really be distributed among numerous driveways to spread that demand and that impact out. As it relates to the originally submitted traffic study, the difference in trip generation for new traffic really is about 5 to 7 vehicle trip difference over the course of an hour. It's inconsequential. but we've appropriately addressed that particular aspect and comment of the peer review. And if we were to look at this diagrammatically, right, on an aerial, what's shown here is the net difference in trips. These are new trips that would be generated over the course of an hour from various areas of town on Route 9, as well as Maple Avenue and Oak Street to the south. And you'll see that this particular time of day, this is the morning peak hour, we're expecting on Route 9 to or from the east, for instance, just under 60 trips an hour to be traveling toward the site, about a vehicle a minute, westbound, and leaving or heading eastbound about the same number, just slightly higher, 71 vehicles per hour. And similar volumes, between 52 and 57 vehicles per direction on the westerly leg of Route 9. When we look at the local street systems, Maple Avenue, for instance, as we would be heading into or out of the downtown area, we expect over the course of an hour about one vehicle every 2 minutes to be traveling either to or from the town center area, between 25 and 26 vehicles per hour. And on Oak Street to the south, this similar, 22 to 23 vehicles per hour. Right? So these demands, again, are principally oriented to the Route 9 corridor as opposed to the local street systems. A lot of the traffic is pass-by related. If we look at the evening peak hour equivalent, the numbers look very similar. They're slightly higher on the Route 9 side, coming back into the development, heading westbound at 84 vehicles over the course of an hour, where it's 67 leaving or heading eastbound. The volumes to or from the downtown area of Shrewsbury are again in the 30 vehicle range, either going to or from, and same thing for Oak Street to the south. And on a Saturday, while the numbers are somewhat elevated, about 90 to 100 vehicles to or from the east on Route 9. Saturday is also a lower volume period of the week when compared to a weekday. So those will give the board some sense as to the relative change in volume that the project is expected to generate. Operationally, what does that mean? We've conducted a full operational analysis, a level of service analysis to understand the amount of delay that intersections sustain today, what we expect they'll sustain with added growth independent of the project, and then adding on the trips that I just mentioned, how those levels of service and delay might change. And what we are able to say is that as we look at each of the key locations that were studied, that they all operate below capacity. And by below capacity, what I mean is that they all function at a level of service D or better. And depending on which intersection we're looking at, if you look at the Route 9 locations and you look at Maple Avenue, for instance, it's currently operating at a level of service A. It has very modest delays during peak hours. And as we look into the future, no build 7 years from now, and then with and without the project, that A becomes a B in the no build, and it stays as a B with this project in place. The evening results show the same, and the Saturday midday, it's B today, it'll be B 7 years from now without the project, it will be a B with the project. So you can see for all of the locations along Route 9, they're D or better in every case, and there's no instance in which that letter grade designation changes as a result of the project. There will be additional delays created by the 60 to 70 vehicle peak direction trips that I mentioned, but they're not the types of delays that will change the letter grade rating of how those intersections function. And likewise for local intersections, if we look at locations along Maple Avenue, they're at Bs and Cs. And again, I think the only change might relate to the Old Mill intersection on a Saturday, where it goes from a level of service B to a level of service C. And same thing for the the Oak and Maple intersection, goes from a B to a C on a Saturday. But these are very good results. They indicate that there is ample capacity to accommodate additional traffic from this project without having to make any substantive change or mitigate any excessive delay. We also look carefully at safety in the context of crash data that's published by Mass DOT. And through peer review, we've actually expanded that crash analysis to include additional years and additional geographic areas within each of the intersections that we looked at. There are no locations that were classified as high crash locations. So none of the locations that we evaluated were listed on what's called the high crash database that Mass DOT maintains. And there are only 2 locations where we've identified either slightly above average crash rate or an above average crash rate. But even in those instances, the more recent crash data for the most recent 3-year period indicates a declining crash rate, and in fact results in a condition in which no safety countermeasures are warranted. And this table actually summarizes that. Again, a lot of numbers here, but you'll see the 2 locations that were identified as having a slightly above average crash experience would include Route 9 at Harrington and Svensson Road. That above average crash rate, it's literally just above average, is really being driven by a higher crash experience that was recorded in 2018 and 2019 that has since come down consistently to about 9 to 10 crashes per year. And so if you actually develop a crash rate based on the more current data, that's actually a location that is below average characteristics for the area. So there's no specific trend there that we're concerned with that would require a countermeasure. Route 9 at Lake Street was the other, and that one is slightly above average as well. And again, a lot of the crashes that the higher crash experience at that location really dates back to 2018, and it began coming down in 2019, and again in 2020 during the COVID period, went up slightly and is coming back down again. So there's no specific trend even at that location that, in our opinion, would require some kind of a countermeasure. It's not a high crash location as defined by Mass DOT. It has a declining crash rate. And although it's not on this table, we've actually updated this to include 2024 and 2025 as well, which shows the same trend. It's a downward trend in crashes. So from a safety perspective, we're not seeing any particular hotspots here that would require a countermeasure. Now, that's the traffic impact of the project. Roughly half of the commentary from peer review really had to do with site access and circulation. It's a large combination of sites. There's multiple driveways. So we've gone through a process working collaboratively with Bowler to identify and resolve those issues. And what I'd like to do is present at a high level how the site plan has been modified to address those comments. Tonight's focus really isn't on the minute details of the site plan itself. We believe that will be discussed in more detail as part of the Graves review response, and Tim will be present to talk about details. So we'll keep it at a higher level, but we'll start with parking for the site. Right? There's a lot of parking that was proposed for the site, and one of the more significant comments for peer review was, can you bank spaces? Can you provide a basis for reducing the number of spaces so that the number is more in line with zoning requirements and also industry standards? And we've done that, and I'll present the findings of that. In addition to the parking banking question, we've also identified modifications to driveways that would have them more pedestrian friendly, having sidewalks continuously run through sidewalks rather than tip down and come back up again. We've identified 2 new pedestrian crossings, one on Oak and one on Maple, which will be controlled with flashing beacons. We've Bowler has extensively updated the internal sidewalk systems so that everything's now connected from one site to the other. And there are a series of internal circulation enhancements that really speak to eliminating islands, adjusting where crossings are, and ensuring that fire apparatus can properly maneuver throughout the site. So this is the high-level overview. This is a plan prepared by Bowler, and it's color rendered to provide context and to kind of distinguish the various sections of the site. As the board is aware, Lot 1 really comprises the commercial pads that front Route 9. There are a total of 7 pads that consist of so-called Lot 1. And Lot 2 comprises the supermarket building as well as the residential components of the project. The driveways that are intended to serve the site include on Oak Street, a principal driveway serving the front 4 pads of Lot 1. That's the very first driveway that you come to as you would turn onto Oak Street, and about 250 feet or so up the hill, you would have that first driveway. Another 200, or rather 150 feet or so away, you would have a second driveway, and its function really is to provide access solely to the 4 residential buildings on Lot 2. And then there's a third driveway to the north, which is really, and I'll speak to this in more detail in a moment, it's really an emergency-only driveway. It currently is a curb cut that provides access to a single-family home. It will continue to serve that function, but it will also, in this iteration, represent a gated location that allows emergency-only access, inbound access, to the residential portion of the site. On the Route 9 side, we have the first driveway beyond Oak Street as an enter-only, it's almost like a slip ramp of sorts, to get into that upper pad. And then in the very lower or left side of this drawing, at the bottom of the hill, a right-in, right-out driveway, which actually exists there today. It's just going to be modified so that it's a bit more clear and articulated. On the Maple Avenue side, through our discussions with DOT, originally 3 driveways were proposed. Those have been reduced to 2, one of which is a commercial driveway that's going to serve the supermarket use in the lower commercial pads, and the second, which is going to serve Building 5, the residential component. So let's talk parking. Parking banking has been identified in numerous locations throughout the site. They're highlighted in blue outline here. The total number of banked spaces is just under 100 parking spaces, so it's not an insignificant banking that we're proposing. You'll see that for the upper residential units, the 4 buildings up there, there are 27 spaces of the 349 space supply that would be banked, leaving just over 300 spaces there to account for those uses. And as I'll speak to in a moment, that very well matches up to a traditional parking supply for residential in today's market, but also affords the ability for some flexibility based on market conditions for opening up bank parking if it's actually demonstrated to be needed. On the commercial pads 1 through 4, all of the spaces that front Route 9 would be banked and landscaped, and they're shown in that blue box. The number of spaces for each of the pads is roughly about 8 to 11 spaces per pad that would be banked. And then in addition to those, the spaces that would flank the circulation aisle would also be banked. So you have an opportunity for more landscaping along the aisle. On the lower pads, the same concept for the lower commercial pads. All of the spaces along the Route 9 frontage would be banked and landscaped. And then on the supermarket side, anything behind and north of the building, roughly 20 parking spaces, would be banked. This is a table that it tabulates all of that. And if we look at Lot 1 as a combination of uses, what we're showing is that the zoning minimum requirements would have 215 parking spaces required. The number of spaces provided before banking would be 271, so slightly higher than, but not extremely higher than, zoning requirement. When we take out 50 spaces for banked spaces, that 271 goes down to 221, which is just above where the zoning minimums would be. Right? So we believe that the banking number is appropriate and in line with, trying to keep things closer to a zoning minimum and closer to what's known as an 85th percentile demand on an industry standard basis. For the Lot 2 components, similar results, just under 47 spaces banked. The zoning minimum is 489, 621 spaces proposed. When we net out the 47 banked spaces, we're sub five, we're in the 500s, still slightly above the zoning minimums. The most substantial additional parking above zoning would really be associated with the supermarket pad itself, and there's a reason for that. That particular piece of the site, it's a 20,000 square foot building. It would likely house a specialty supermarket tenant, something along the lines of, you think Aldi or even and I'll use the name, but it's not proposed. TJ Trader Joe's kind of an operation. So the footprint for those specialty type grocers really tends to be much smaller than a traditional Shaw's or Star Market or Stop and Shop. The industry standard trip rates for supermarkets are based on 170,000 square foot supermarkets, right? So it's not necessarily a fair comparison. And in our experience, the smaller specialty type retailers, grocers, would require more than 80 to 86 spaces to properly function. If you go to TJ's at Route 9 and Shrewsbury here, you'll understand that too, right? It's so that's the only area of the site where there's a proposal to have spaces that are above the minimum zoning and that are per industry standard, nominally above that standard as well, but for good reason. As we focus on driveways, we are now proposing tip-down driveways, right? These are driveways that would have the sidewalk that fronts the property run entirely through the driveways without changing elevation, so that it's easier from the pedestrian perspective to traverse the driveway. And the front or apron portion of the driveway would actually be ramped down to street grade, which actually tends to slow down turning traffic into the driveway. So those are comments that were suggested by peer review and are now suggested and proposed as part of the plan. And you'll see an example of what that looks like in this primary driveway serving the commercial pads, for instance, on Oak Street. And in this example, the residential Building 5 driveway on Maple Avenue, which would have the same type of a design treatment. The northerly Oak Street driveway I mentioned originally was anticipated to also serve residents of buildings 1 through 4 in the upper residential pads, as well as the continued use of the single-family residential use. Having discussed among the team and in consideration of that landowner, the premise of that has changed a bit. Now what's being proposed is actually to widen out the existing driveway that's there. So it provides a 20-foot standard, which is what you need for emergency access purposes, and to carry that through to the buildings 1 through 4, but to gate it just beyond that single-family home. So its function really is exclusively for emergency access to buildings 1 through 4, but it also affords an enhanced driveway condition to the single-family resident. The original plans for this had a very narrow driveway for that use. Now there's an expansive driveway for that use, and we think that that's a substantial enhancement and benefit to that particular landowner. By gating it, we're also negating the negative effect of having vehicles turn with their headlights and shine on the house and create undue impact. So pretty positive benefit there. From a pedestrian perspective, I mentioned 2 new crossings, one of which was originally anticipated on Oak Street to connect the Williamsburg Court side of Oak Street to the west side of Oak Street and the site. Originally, that crossing was intended to be closer to where the residential driveway is, further north. Peer review commentary had suggested that that be shifted to better align with desire lines. And we've done that. That crossing is now at the Williamsburg Court driveway and is immediately next to the prime commercial driveway for the site, but also very close to where the sidewalk connections would lead eventually down to the lower pads, on Lot 2. On the Maple Street side, we've added a new crossing, also controlled by a beacon control, rapid rectangular flashing beacon at the commercial driveway that would allow folks either from Building 5 or any of the commercial uses to cross over Maple Avenue to get to the other plaza or continue on the public sidewalk system on that side of Maple Avenue. Within the site, this is probably the most substantial change from a pedestrian perspective, is everything that's shown in orange on this plan represents a sidewalk connection at this point. And you'll see that there's an extensive system of sidewalk that runs not only along Route 9, Oak Street, Maple Avenue, but also within the site itself, connecting the upper residential buildings as well as the commercial pads all the way down to Building 5. The sidewalk that exists along Maple Avenue and the series of sidewalks that then connect into the supermarket pad area, cross over the circulation aisles within the lower pads to provide access to those front, Route 9 uses. There's also a sidewalk system that runs along the driveway itself. And so everything is well knit together from a pedestrian perspective. And as will be discussed in more detail as part of the site plan process, these have all been graded so that they're ADA compliant, and that was a significant challenge because of the grade differentials that exist from the upper residential pads down to the lower residential pad and commercial pad, some 40-foot or so grade differential. So these have been thoughtfully designed with the eye of making them ADA compliant. And it affords multiple ways to get from Oak Street to Maple Avenue. You could go down Route 9, you could go Oak to 9 through the lower pads. You can go directly from Oak to Building 5. There are iterations of how you, from a pedestrian perspective, could navigate, and it's pretty well thought out. In terms of on-site circulation, changes to the 2 roundabout features were implemented. On the lower side, the comment really had to do with the potential for Route 9 traffic to use the site as a cut-through to Maple Avenue. While we don't believe that there's an inherent benefit to using the site for that purpose, the roundabout feature actually has been designed to prevent that. And you'll see it's a tier-shaped type design that was discussed with peer review as well as the town. That's now a design feature. On the upper pads, Lot 1, the roundabout is really a cul-de-sac, if you will, that exists at the end of the circulation aisle. That serves 2 purposes. It's for emergency vehicles to be able to reverse direction to leave the site again, or for anyone who would be destined to the last retail box here, who realized, gee, I didn't want to go there, I need a reverse direction, they would be able to do so in that cul-de-sac. The design enhancement there really was to design it in a way that made it abundantly clear that you should not make a right turn back onto the driveway to get back to Route 9, right? That's an enter-only driveway. And so there's new gore striping, new signs, repositioned stop bar that all reinforce that one-way counterclockwise circulation so that you can return to the aisle and prevents people from mistaking the driveway for an exit driveway. Within the upper pads, each of the island features that were originally contemplated have been removed from each of the driveways serving those pads. So those are free and clear. If you want to make a left or a right turn, depending on where you're going, you can do so uninhibited. Finally, as we talk about emergency access and circulation, we've designed this in a way that allows for the largest responding vehicle, the Shrewsbury Tower vehicle, to access each of the driveways, circulate entirely to and through and around the buildings within the site, and each of the retail pads. So we've carefully tested each of those locations to ensure that the geometry is appropriate for that particular vehicle. And as we look at the individual retail pads, we've looked at every retail pad to make sure that that same circulation can go entirely around the building. And one of the outcomes of that is that as we focus in as an example, is that there are spaces that were originally contemplated in the original site plan that were next to the dumpster units, the enclosed dumpster units, that were impacted by that sweep. And those spaces will now be eliminated so that that area is unencumbered for those types of vehicles. One of the design enhancements that will be upcoming in the plan would be to landscape those areas rather than just stripe them out. So there would be a further enhancement to landscape above what you see here on the plan. And that was the genesis of it. As I back up, you can see each of those retail pads actually has the same condition. So relative to the plan, the original plan that the board had seen, there are roughly 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 parking spaces that have been eliminated for that issue alone, plus the 97 bank spaces that we just discussed. So there's a substantial reduction in the parking here from where we started. That concludes our overview of the traffic for the project, the impacts, as well as the site-related access and circulation commentary. I've encapsulated as part of this, though I didn't go point by point, our responses to peer review. We understand that the peer review is still ongoing. It's yet to be formalized. I've had the opportunity today to do a check-in with the peer reviewer to make sure that there aren't any issues that have apparently not been addressed that are still significant issues. I don't believe that that's the case, but the peer reviewer is here this evening and can answer to that and the status of that review. So in conclusion, this is, from the bird's eye view, a large assemblage of property, a lot of buildings, a lot of parking, but from a traffic impact perspective, using industry standard models and procedures, it can work within the context of all of the infrastructure that's already on Route 9, that's already on local streets, with significant enhancement to the pedestrian environment. So really the focal point isn't so much traffic impact because it can work. It's making sure that from a pedestrian perspective in particular that things are interconnected, they're safe, and efficient and improved. We look forward to continuing to answer any questions the board might have and to wrapping up the peer review process.
Great. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you.
I do know that our peer reviewer is here. Maureen, I don't know if you have anything that you want to speak to this evening before we get into other questions or comments. Just give you the opportunity.
Sure. Good evening, Maureen Lepine from Bowman Consulting. As Bob had mentioned, we are still working through the rest of our comments and the responses to those comments. Admittedly, there were about 60 comments. It's a large site. Half of those comments were sort of addressed towards the traffic impact study portion and the other half towards the site, and it really kind of operates as two separate sites given how it's divided in all the driveways. So we are working through some things still and hope to finalize that comment letter within the next couple of days. I can say that we are now in agreement with a few items that I'll mention now and will be in our letter. The site distances and site triangles that were provided on the plans, the existing traffic volume data. We had some of our comments were really kind of general comments that we usually ask just for due diligence, for clarifications on development of existing traffic volumes, like the seasonal adjustment, and then future traffic volumes for the general growth rates and site-specific projects. So those have been answered. I think we're in agreement on existing traffic volumes and the future no-build traffic volumes and the growth rates and how those volumes were developed. We are still working through the updated trip generation information and the future build volumes and the analyses that go with that, just making sure that we agree with the information that Bob has provided. And then we are still looking at the updated safety analysis and recommendations relative to the crashes. Just want to look through those and make sure we agree with the findings there, as well as some of the updated pedestrian enhancements within the site. I know there have been some updates on the site plans themselves in terms of the roundabout features. I think we agree with those, with the new teardrop shape. That addresses our comment. There's been an additional crosswalk added on Maple Avenue to connect the Maple Avenue and Route 9 portion to the site. And there's been some modification to the proposed crosswalk on Oak Street. So I think we're in agreement generally with those improvements, and we're hoping to wrap things up early next week with everything else that's remaining.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Chris, do you have anything?
No, I just, in terms of the tip-down driveways, I just wanted to, I was trying to pull up the plans, but my computer's a little slow with the file size. Can you go over the grading in the tip-down driveways in terms of headlights? I know there's some shrubbery and stuff across the street with the Williamsburg Court, but I just want to make sure, I think that is a improvement, but I just want to make sure that there's appropriate mitigation there as well.
Yeah, we'll put this up on the screen again, the overall site plan, so that we all understand what we're talking about. So I refer to them as tip-down driveways, but essentially, if you were leaving the site, you'd be at a common grade to the sidewalk, right? And then to turn onto, in that example, Oak Street, you'd actually then have a small ramp, if you will, that brings you down to the roadway grade, right? So it tips down. So from a pedestrian perspective, that allows for a simple walk across the driveway. You don't need tactile strips. It's just a cleaner way to handle it. Most communities are designing driveways. In fact, I think in the downtown area of Shrewsbury, that's the design standard. In terms of headlights, I can't speak specifically to, I don't believe there's a material difference whether or not you use a tip down or an at-grade driveway in terms of headlight, prominence, across the street. I don't believe that that's going to be an issue. And in fact, I think the only driveway where that would really even apply would be for the residential driveway on Oak Street, which is a much lower volume, God bless you, traffic when compared to the other driveways that are more commercially oriented. But yeah. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to open it up to board member comments. Dino, do you have anything?
Yeah, for the Route 9 portion of it, did you have to get Mass DOT's blessing on this or no?
Yeah, we actually consulted with them very early, probably about 8 months ago. The prior iteration of the site actually had 3 driveways on Route 9. And the comment that we received from DOT was they liked the concept of the ramp driveway to the upper pads. Right? There's no friction created by that, and there'll be a wide shoulder that vehicles can use to actually access that driveway. As the board is probably aware, as you're coming over Route 9, passing Oak Street, there's the distance from the travel lane to the roadway edge is it's very wide. And so what we would be doing is actually converting that into a 12-foot shoulder, essentially a lane, that as you go through the signal, you can transition to the shoulder, the 12-foot lane, travel for a couple of 100 feet, and then get into the driveway. Right? So that has been reviewed with DOT. They're comfortable with that. The lower driveway is a right in, right out. It's there today. The original concern that they had to do with that third driveway that we envisioned, which would have been between those. So at the bottom of the hill, right in, right out. Top of the hill, enter only. The middle one would have been a right in, right out type driveway. And their concern was weaving that might have been created by that third driveway. So that's been eliminated. So we're comfortable that, just the 2. Maple Avenue is also Mass DOT jurisdiction.
Maple Avenues?
Yeah, surprisingly, right? Most people don't realize that, but that section of Maple Avenue is actually state highway. And so they have jurisdiction of those driveways as well. Their commentary there, there was once a driveway behind the supermarket, really for mainly back of house operation kind of a thing. They didn't like that. We eliminated that. So we've only got 2 driveways on Maple Avenue, one for the residential building and one for the commercial component. So we're comfortable that what's presented here, which we presented to DOT, that they're comfortable with, so there won't be any surprises when we get to the permit stage with DOT.
Thank you.
Just a couple quick ones. Your traffic analysis at various intersections included a good chunk of north of your development on like Oak and Maple along Route 9. I didn't see as much of an analysis south of kind of your site and south of Route 9.
Right, say south of, if you continue down Oak Street, for instance?
Yeah,
Yeah.
as well as even south on Lake. Lake, I thought there was one analysis, but I mean, what was your? I'm sure there's some good rationale there.
Right, yeah. So as we're trying to define key impacted locations, the rule of thumb is you want to study locations that have a sustained, an increase in traffic of 100 vehicles or more per hour, or more than a 5% change in volume under a weekday high volume condition, right? A weekday type commuter condition. I presented a slide earlier that shows the percentage increases, those. And if you look at the volumes that we're proposing on, although I didn't show a percentage, but if you look at Oak Street to the south of the project, and I think that accounts for somewhere around 5 to 8% of the traffic, something like that. We're talking about vehicle trips that are well below that 100 vehicle standard. You know, they're just over 20 per direction. So there wouldn't be a material impact anywhere beyond that, because we're talking about one vehicle every 3 minutes being added to the roadway. We can quantify it, but it wouldn't really result in a useful purpose to analyze other locations south of that, because the volumes don't really justify it. Same thing on Maple Avenue, to from the downtown area, for instance. We're talking about one vehicle every couple of minutes, less than 30 per hour in either direction. There wouldn't be any useful purpose to analyzing that in the context of the number of vehicles that we expect to add. Whereas on Route 9, if you look at Lake Street or Harrington, the 2 endpoints of the study area, those are 4 to 5% change. And then when you get beyond there, things dissipate. So that would meet the typical criteria that Mass DOT applies in selecting which intersections to study, right? So everything is 5% impact or greater at those locations that in combination have more than 100 cars an hour impacting them, right? So those are the gateways on Route 9. Everything else falls well below that standard. So that was the basis for why we selected what we did. And I believe that there was concurrence with the peer review that those were appropriate.
The northernmost driveway that you have, that's gated, right?
Yes.
And how would that, again, this may be getting into the details, probably not appropriate at this stage, but
Right.
how would that gated driveway operate, you know, like I'm assuming it's mostly for emergency vehicles, in which case would they have a key to get in, or is it something that automatically opens? Or?
Yes, it's possible to have a gate control that's automated. That is possible, but the typical process is to have what they call a Knox box on the gate that the fire department has a key for. You know, it's kind of a skeleton key of sorts, right? It's something that would be directly coordinated with the fire department. But if the desire of the fire department were to have an optically operating gate, that is certainly feasible. I'm not aware of any locations in Shrewsbury where optically operated gates actually are provided for fire access, but it is possible. And if there's a desire by fire to have that, then that certainly can be done. But typically, it's a Knox box with a key that the fire department has. And the gate position was thoughtfully placed here so that fire apparatus could actually pull into this expanded driveway off of Oak Street and not block anybody, or vice versa. So I think it's a good design, and quite frankly, in the normal response, they would be going to the primary driveway anyway. This is really just in the event that something strange happened at the principal driveway, they would have a secondary means of being able to get to the same site. So it's, frankly, I think it would probably be used more by pedestrians than it would by vehicles. It's a glorified sidewalk.
Yeah. My last one would be, again, my main concern on the traffic would be during specific like morning school rush hour times, and then when the school is let go in the afternoon. In terms of your traffic analysis, have you put in focus on that aspect of it and how that would impact the Route 9 and Oak Street intersection in the future? If there's any way to add a lane of sort? I know you looked at something on those lines at the Lake and Route 20 intersection for another project, but on those lines, have you given any thought to that?
Yeah, so again, early in the planning process, we actually had looked at multiple lanes on Oak Street coming down the hill. And the issue with the multiple lanes is that it creates, first of all, it's not needed from a capacity standpoint, right? So the analysis that we presented, which relies on the single lane coming down the hill to Route 9, is sufficient under peak hour conditions to efficiently work without extensive queuing. I spent a lot of my life in Shrewsbury. I have relatives who live here, and I will hear people say, I had to wait in a line on Oak Street to get out, and it was probably at 2:45, right? There are going to be ebbs and flows of traffic for very distinct periods of time when schools release, for instance, when you might have that condition. It's very brief, and it's infrequent. And it's not something that you would design to. What you're really trying to do is design to a typical condition that would exist during a commuter period in the morning, in the evening, maybe even on a weekend. And under all of those scenarios, the single lane coming down Oak works just fine. The maximum queue is a couple of 100 feet long. The average queue is half that. And introducing an additional lane, though it's not needed from a capacity standpoint, actually introduces potential for confusion. In that if you're coming out of a commercial driveway and you want to go, let's say you're coming out of Williamsburg Court and you want to go east or to Worcester, and you'd actually have to cross onto Oak Street, and if there were two lanes, you'd actually be doing almost like a staged movement from what would be the through and left turn lane to a right turn lane, right? So introducing an additional lane on Oak Street actually creates scenarios where you've got not what I'd call weaving, but you've got movement between lanes. Someone coming out of a commercial use that wants to go eastbound on Route 9 to the left turn lane would cross over the right turn lane to do so. So it's not ideal, and it's not needed from a capacity standpoint. To your question on school impacts, we haven't done an analysis of 2:45 p.m. periods, and I understand that there's traffic that happens during those periods. I'll also say that the amount of traffic that the site would generate during those time periods is probably at its lowest level, because you've got the residential components, which are generating most of their traffic between the hours of anywhere from 6 in the morning to 10 or 4 to 6, 7 p.m. And the commercial entities, many of them would be restaurant type uses that probably in many cases may not even be open in the morning, or would generate their higher levels of activity during dinner time or lunchtime periods. Some of these uses are envisioned to be, automotive care type uses, car wash, uses that rely on pass-by traffic and are not generating new traffic necessarily. So without having the actual analysis done, I could say that if we did do the analysis, it would show that we have a much lower impact during those other hours when you'll have a surge from a school release, for instance. When people might say, gee, it took me, I was number 15 in line to get through the signal. Well, that happens for 10 or 15 minutes at 2:45 or 3 o'clock, and then it goes away. And it's not really what we're designing to.
Thank you. Thanks.
Tim, do you have anything?
Yes. Bob, it certainly seems from your objective analysis of the study that it seems minimal, the impact that this project will have on local traffic, and as far as, the intersections operating below capacity, et cetera, but cognitive bias says otherwise, right?
Yep, understood.
How would you describe the impact this project will have on the roadways surrounding it to residents of Shrewsbury? How would you describe it?
If residents will see a project, and their experience of the project is going to be much different than the bird's eye view that we see, right? With, where the plans that we've been looking at are plan views that, a resident would not experience in the same way. So if you're traveling on Oak Street in the morning, you would most likely not see the residential buildings in that first upper pad. Those are set back substantially from the street. Residential uses, I think there are 163 units, is it, in those upper pads?
200.
Is it 200? There are a lot of units in that area, sure, but the traffic generated by that number of units during a commuter hour, when a resident would be going to Route 9 in the morning, would result in seeing one vehicle every 2 minutes coming out of that driveway. It's not a substantial number of trips. And the trips that we've identified in the study are not made out of whole cloth. They're actually derived from good industry standards that we actually have measured in real life in Massachusetts for similar projects of similar scale. So the numbers bear out very well to built projects, and those impacts, especially for residential uses, even though there are a lot of units that people may perceive as generating a lot of traffic, in reality are generating, from the standpoint of traveling past the driveway, a vehicle every couple of minutes. It's that kind of an impact. The commercial pad use on Oak Street, 4 pads. One of them is going to be a car wash. Car washes typically don't start generating any kind of substantial traffic until at least mid-morning, usually much higher in the middle of the day, and maybe on your way home, as a function of convenience, you want to get a car wash, you drive from traffic that's already going by the site. So that is one example. Another automotive type use, oil change facility, same thing. Restaurant in the morning may not even be open. So your experience from a commute perspective, traveling down Oak Street in the morning, will be minimal based on the types of commercial entities that are likely to occupy those uses. The other aspect of this is that while there are many pads, there are many driveways, right? Those are the two that I'm referring to in an example. What would a resident of Shrewsbury experience? On Oak Street, from my perspective and based on the numbers that are now subject to peer review, very modest. Yes, you'll occasionally see a vehicle coming out of a driveway as you're driving by it, but you're not going to see queues in driveways or queues on Oak Street waiting to get into driveways. That's not what this project is. It's not even close to what this project is. On Route 9, again, a third of the traffic is being generated as a pass-by trip, not a new trip. The first driveway is an entered driveway. No one's being impacted by that. The second driveway at the foot of the hill is a right in, right out. There's no left turn movements onto Route 9. On Maple Avenue, same thing for Building 5. Vehicle every couple of minutes coming out of that driveway, not substantial. And then the commercial driveway entity, supermarket's not generating a lot of traffic in the morning. Neither of those pads. A bank in the morning at 8 even 9 in the morning, not generating a lot of traffic. So, though I think there will be an increase, and we've quantified that. It's all subject to peer review. We are showing added delay, but those delays are measured as in seconds, so like 3, 4, 5 second delay increases. I fully understand. I mean, I harken back to the Spags days, right? When you're trying to get to Spags on a Saturday morning, right, to see all your neighbors. Even back in the 80s, Route 9 could be challenging, right, during those time periods. When we did the permitting for Lakeway Commons, right, there was a lot of angst about adding a signal to Route 9 so that you can get into and out of Lakeway Commons, and that it was so close to Harrington Avenue. How could that ever work? Well, it does, right? So we've got a track record of actually building these projects and measuring their performance after they're built, and they actually function quite well after they're built. Did they add delay? Did the signal at Lakeway Commons add delay? It probably did, but it didn't create a situation where you can't get through the signal for 2 or 3 cycles. Right? This project, in some ways is similar to Lakeway Commons, but it has more driveways, and it has a range of uses that are much different than what you'll see at Lakeway Commons, like a car wash or oil changing place or a small restaurant. So my opinion, which is based on what we studied, is that this is going to have an impact, but it's not going to create congestion. It's not going to create a negative experience from the resident's standpoint as they're traveling past the site. And its impact to the downtown area is de minimis, right? Understand there are other competing...
That's the word I was looking for, Bob.
De minimis.
Your opinion, if you think,
Yeah.
objectively,
Yeah.
based on your analysis, that the impact of traffic from this project is de minimis to the neighborhood and
It is.
surrounding roads.
It is, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay. Steve, do you have questions or?
My comment, I agree with Perna. I think that the 4 commercial lots on Oak Street that would benefit by a right turn only at Oak and Boston Turnpike, that does stack up. We don't know who your users are going to be, Bob.
Right.
Yeah, I imagine if you had a Chick-fil-A or something, it would be a disaster having that single lane. So I'm in agreement with Perna about that. Now, another question I have, and again, I kind of disagree with you. This is nothing like Lakeway Commons. You got 2 projects here. You got a commercial project on the southerly side of the site along the southerly lot along Boston Turnpike, and now you have your mixed-use project, what the developer characterizes as a mixed-use project. And I appreciate your efforts to relative to connectivity with the pedestrian walkways, but again, most of this is not your issue, but one point is, visually and everything else, this mixed-use project, it is not connected. The residences, other than some new pedestrian accesses, are not connected to this 20,000 square foot building. If I was coming home, say I'm gonna do some grocery shopping, and I stopped at the market there, there's really no easy way, if I live in one of those 4 buildings that are accessed off Oak Street, to get from the supermarket to those buildings. They're completely separated.
Well, they're connected with a walkway.
A walkway, but let's face it, if you have, in today's world, I'm coming home from work, I want to drive to, there's got to be an easier way to access that. again, I have issues with calling this a mixed-use project because this supermarket is entirely separated, other than some recent additions to pedestrian traffic. It's completely separated from the residential component. If you have 6 bags of groceries, you're not gonna park in the Aldi lot, or whatever it is, and walk to the pedestrian, or walk from your, park at your residential unit, walk down to the Aldi, and drag up 6 bags of groceries. It doesn't seem, it's not connected. It's not connected visually, and maybe pedestrian-wise it is, but certainly not from a vehicular aspect.
There is, Building 5 clearly has proximity to that supermarket that I think would generate some synergy between them. We didn't take credit for that in how we estimated traffic. We expressly said that in the traffic report. And I agree with you, Steve, that, I wouldn't be inclined to hoof groceries up to the upper residential, but, what's the typical experience by Shrewsbury resident? They're not, for the most part, they don't have access to, outside of perhaps a limited number of residences at Lakeway Commons, to Whole Foods. They don't have the ability to, walk to the supermarket and back, right? That's just not something that really exists in Shrewsbury. It is being created in this project by the relationship between Building 5 and that particular building, but I acknowledge that it's not being connected, if you will, for that purpose to the upper residential. And I don't know that you can.
Right.
There's a 40-foot grade differential between the two.
More than that.
Yeah, so we're trying to show here, and I don't know if it comes through visually over, being presented to Mr. Orlakis, but given the grade difference, we're dealing with completely different terrain than Lakeway Commons. You go to Lakeway Commons, it's all flat. It's easy to walk in between the buildings and the grocery store because it's a flat surface, right? It's all accessible. Here we have these massive grade differences. And I have to commend Bowler for the pedestrian connectivity because they have this very unique walkway system that allows for accessible walkways between the two different developments while making it, functional given the grade change. I mean, there's certain areas where I called Bowler and said, hey, can we just do a quick sidewalk between these two sites and this little short pinch point? And they're like, that's 40, 50 feet. There's no way that's going to be accessible. So I recognize that it's not possible to walk from the quad buildings to the grocery store or these commercial pads, but given the grade difference and the distance, it's not logical. And so I would say that this is a mixed-use development, given that we have the residential and the commercial use. There is connectivity between Building 5 and the grocery store and the separate development, the commercial pads to the south. They are separate developments. We are applying for them separately, as we've discussed previously. But certainly, the applicant and the team have sought to really provide that connectivity between the two different developments. As we've discussed in previous hearings, we're seeking that approval of the commercial pads under the commercial business overlay underlaying zoning district, but we're trying to bring as much Lakeway overlay into those pads as much as possible, understanding that there are certain market requirements associated with those pads. Now, we recognize that the board has very strong feelings regarding the design of those buildings, and we plan to talk about that at a later meeting. But certainly, from a connectivity standpoint, given the hand that we're dealt, I would commend the team on their efforts.
I guess I would strongly disagree. I'm only one vote. I don't see it. I don't think a lot of effort was put forth. And again, this is not the issue for Bob here. I think Bob has done a good job. But I just don't think the sites are connected. I understand that you're dealing with some grades, but you're looking for an awful lot of units. And you're throwing us a bone with a 20,000 square foot supermarket that is not connected. It's essentially a separate lot, not connected to the residential. It's nothing like Lakeway Commons. But again, that's my opinion. So I'm good with questions for now.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I do have questions, but I'm sure you don't want to hear me yammer on. I'd like to provide members of the public who are here with the opportunity at this hour to answer or ask any questions that they might have. So at this point, I'll hold my questions and see if there are members of the public wishing to speak on this matter this evening. Yes, sir. Please come up, state your name.
Mark Majori from 19 Gordon Road. I kind of want to go what Perna said and Steve said about Oak Street. And why didn't you take study of the southern portion of Oak Street? Like where the Town Fair tire is, if you're going from that entrance and either going straight up North Oak or taking a right onto Route 9 East or taking a left onto Route 9 West. As right now, there's only one traffic light that covers left, right, straight on both directions. Do you agree or disagree that that light change probably needs to have a left lane light, multiple lights to kind of make that work?
Through the chair?
Sure.
So you're talking about the signal at Oak Street and Route 9?
Yes.
And you're suggesting that maybe that it needs more lanes or?
No more lanes. So you mentioned also on Lake Street that you said there was when you did the study on the Lake Street on where where the Beale School is.
Yeah.
You said there was decrease in of accidents or traffic on that portion, and they recently in the last couple of years they added a left. If you're going like to where Buffalo Wild Winds are, right? You're going down down Beale School, and they added a blinking green left-hand turn light that was never there. I think they added it a couple of years ago. At one time, it was just one single light that had directions both ways. So in one direction, you either go right, straight, or left, and then the other lane, where the banks are, left, right there. But they changed it to make it a left-hand green light and one arrow there. My thing is when I travel up Oak to take a left onto Route 9 West, right? Going down all the traffic that fights down where the bowling alley is, and they want to go either take a right onto Route 9 East or Route 9 West or go straight on to Oak. It's sometimes you only got allowed one car to take a left because we have to yield for it.
Right, so you're, rather than studying additional locations, what you're really saying is that are there ways that the signal equipment can be modified to reduce, the conflict that you might have in those turns? Through the chair, that intersection will be subject to additional evaluation as part of the access permit process, right? Which is a separate process from the board process.
Yes.
And one of the peer review comments that we have addressed is the potential need to enhance the pedestrian crossing, for instance, that goes across Oak Street. While we are going through the process of discussing that with DOT will be asking the same question, whether or not the signal equipment, the indicators themselves are up to current standard, and whether or not there would be a benefit to modifying those where you either have split phasing of the signal to reduce the conflicts that you mentioned, or changing the signal indicators that would allow for what they call a permissive left turn, right? Or protected turn. The analysis that we presented shows that those aren't necessary to achieve proper operation of the signal, but we will be discussing those same issues with DOT during the access permit process. So if DOT sees a benefit to doing that, that could become an improvement that is implemented as well. But right now, the analysis shows that it's not triggered, it's not warranted, but it's a good comment, and I appreciate it. And we'll
All right, that's all.
Thanks, Mark. Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this matter this evening? Yes, ma'am?
Patricia Lake, 108 Oak Street. Bob, right?
Oh, yes.
Hi,
Hi.
nice to meet you.
Same.
Bob, I would like to extend a personal invitation to you to come hang out at my driveway
Mhm.
when school gets out.
Are
And
you-
when school goes
Are
in
you
the
on
morning.
Oak Street? Sorry.
108 Oak Street, top of the hill.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so that's first. You talked about a lot of things. We talked about not doing a school hours analysis, and that needs to be done because cars are backed up from the Montessori school all the way down past the first driveway of the apartments across the street every day, and it's not just a few minutes. It can be up to 30 minutes, and it's backed up the other way. Which leads me to my next point. If there were an emergency when school was getting out and a fire truck had to get to that back entrance through the 104 entrance, they can't get there because the cars are backed up in both directions for school pickup. Right almost to the end of Oak Street because Sherwood uses that exit as well, and all the way down our hill. So I would suggest that there's no way a fire truck's gonna be able to get around there or to even make that corner based on how the road looks. You say additional delays will be expected of 4 to 5 seconds. It's more like 2 to 3 light cycles just to get out of the driveway and down the hill. But the thing that is really concerning me more than anything else is this crosswalk you speak about. You wanna put a crosswalk down at the bottom out of the apartments. The traffic is already backed up. If somebody were to use the crosswalk and hit the light, everything stops. Traffic that's trying to turn off of Route 9 is now backed up onto Route 9. And my last point that I'd like to make is that in the winter, if you've never driven up or down Oak Street, frequently we go down it sideways because it's so icy and so steep. In fact, we try to avoid going down, and many times we've had to actually use Maple Avenue as an alternate route to get back to our houses because it's less steep. We've got buses that get stuck. We've got people who just pray when they come around the corner, please don't make me have to stop, please don't make me have to stop, because I need the momentum to get up the hill to get to my house. So I think that there needs to be a lot more study done. I think there needs to be a lot more conversation. Again, I really want you to come talk to us and hang out with us and see what it's really like to live in that space and what the impact is going to be. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone? Yes, sir.
Richard Edwards, 80 Oak Street. So I just wanted to reiterate the last comment that was made by one of the board members about how there is no access from the 4 apartments into the other commercial units. And I think that that's going to be an issue within the development, in the fact that, to his point, somebody coming home stops at that supermarket to pick up groceries. They now have to drive all the way back up Maple, turn right onto Oak, and drive all the way around to get back to the apartment complex, the 4 apartments, as opposed to having an access point, an access road in that area that connects those multi-use, the apartments, to those particular businesses there. Now, granted, they've mentioned about the grading being an issue, but you have also pointed out that you're planning on bringing construction equipment in there to totally regrade this area in taking soil and stone from the top to bring it down to the bottom to help level out the grade to a certain extent. So you've already made that claim in one of your previous meetings that you were going to go and do that. So the fact that you were pointing out that the way the grade is now is impossible to have a access point from the apartments down to here, I think is false, to tell you the truth, because they can certainly, with their construction equipment, since they're going to be grading things, they could certainly grade through and make a connecting road there, one. Two, this woman that just recently spoke, she talked about coming south on Oak Street, that slope from down to Route 9, how slippery that is during the winter. One of the emails that I sent to the planning board included pictures when we had a snowstorm. And I'm sure you guys probably remember seeing the pictures that I had sent. And what had happened was a car was driving down Oak Street, and the car had to slide over to the right. Now, I didn't actually see the car, but what I took a picture of were the car tracks that went up on the embankment and almost hit that telephone pole across the street from the Williamsburg entrance. So the gentle lady over there that talked about how that section of Oak Street during the winter is very dangerous, this is just going to add to that even more so. And you're talking about people that potentially will be hurt as a result of that. So those are my 2 points that I want to bring up for today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Hi, Michael Lynch, 295 Maple Avenue. There was when we had the first initial meeting, the big meeting over at the senior center, after that there was a Google form that people were able to fill out with comments. I didn't see that attached to the following agenda. I saw some emails from people. I didn't see that Google form. Did that all get coagulated?
So that survey was provided, and that was for the lead up to the public comment period for the open hearing. We've since closed that.
Okay.
But if people are responding to it, I can happy to pull some of those comments.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that's accessible, because I would love to know if anyone was in favor of this other than the people who benefit from it. And I would really love to know if there's any poor soul who's so indecisive that they need 3 car washes in a 1 mile radius. That's my comment.
Thank you. Any other member? Yes, sir.
Hello, Paul Lindsay, 86 Oak Street. I was at the previous presentation and talk about the school dismissal time. I'm glad that was brought up. I wanted to make sure people understood that we are not under capacity at Oak Street during that afternoon period. We are over capacity with 3 lanes and dangerous situations with children walking, children on bikes, and buses going down the middle. And I don't think adding 207 residential units with access only on Oak Street is going to be tenable. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I'm short. I can't see.
Yeah, I'm Kathleen Cohane, 29 Gleason Road. You piqued my interest when you were talking about the emergency access. That's very similar to what Madison Place has. They have the emergency access that's chained off, and that's where the school bus stops. And that's what got me interested is there gonna be room for the school bus to stop there? And then where will they pick up the children from Building 5? You know, that would add to the conflagration. How big a walk? I don't know. I don't know if you thought about that at all, you know.
Through the chair.
Sure.
Oh, happy to
Yeah.
respond to that. So we've provided a small waiting area kind of near the proposed crosswalk at the Washington Street Apartments for the bus stop along Oak Street. Per law, the bus stop is not allowed to pull onto a private site
Right,
in order
right.
to do that. So they couldn't actually use the
Right.
area of that 104 driveway. And then separately, another waiting area will be provided for for Building 5 up along Maple Ave.
Yeah, so where was this waiting area at
If you could zoom in.
Yeah, I got it right here.
Yeah, right there. Might go a little further in. It'd be
I see.
a kind of an area to congregate there. It's kind of at the nexus of the paths. That we've
Yes,
created
I see.
here.
Okay, good, yeah. The bus will still be there, but that's where you think that people will stop. All right, good.
While you have that up, though, can you just clarify, because that was one of the questions that I had from a school children perspective, that driveway, does it have a a sidewalk next to it? Because I'm imagining
The one on Oak or the one on Maple?
one on Oak.
So on Oak Street, there's no sidewalk north on Oak, on the west side. So the existing sidewalk is on the east side of Oak Street. So what we've contemplated here is the new crossing across Oak Street with the rapid flashing beacons that Bob described. In that area is where we'd have the waiting area for the school bus for children, and that would get you across to the existing sidewalk, because on the east side of.
So there is sidewalk ability from those units.
So that,
down to Oak Street.
you
I'm
follow that
asking, like,
side-
are the kids going to be walking in the driveway down, like
yeah,
in
all
the
the
middle
way-
of the driveway? Yes. Okay.
So
and back up to each of the buildings, we have
Understood.
paths
Okay.
all throughout.
So
I guess my eye just could not.
Yeah, so if I may, Madam
Catch
Chair,
that.
we plan to talk about the overall site after.
Sure.
So maybe it makes sense for Tim to walk through the site now.
If there's no more questions.
If there's no more questions.
The chairwoman has.
Okay.
questions.
I do have a couple of
please.
other traffic-related questions,
Sure.
if possible. The banked spaces that you talked about, in particular, the banked spaces on Maple Street. If I recall from one of your previous presentations, that banked space right on the corner of the grocery store, that was supposed to be what was being called, I might be wrong, there was a pocket park over there. Is that pocket park in the banked space? And okay.
No, we're contemplating a more linear pocket park, and it's not fully developed here, and we'll kind of have some blow-ups as we go to the next meeting with you.
Should show the rendering.
Along,
'cause I think they
just basically along the new sidewalk corridor. So, here it's hard to see because it's kind of being hidden by some trees, but I think we could do a blow-up and really show you what that looks like from a better perspective. But
Without the
we wouldn't
trees.
have that in the bank space, because obviously if we came back to you and said, hey, we'd like to make use of that bank space, we can't get rid of the park.
That was where my brain was going, so I just wanted to clarify that. And then the other item, and I'm asking this of you, Bob, because I am not a traffic engineer. But what I don't understand from the analysis that you kind of had outlined, the A, B, C, and D, as somebody who didn't always get all A's in school, but tried not to get D's. D, in my mind, is the worst. And I guess there are two things that I'm struggling with is how does a no-build scenario have the same level of service as a full build-out scenario?
Okay, that's a great question. Yeah.
And then my second question, so maybe you can take them together, is can you clarify what that D is? Because like I said, a D level of service does not sound, while it might be acceptable, doesn't sound like it's optimal.
Right.
So.
Understood, and it's a common question. So the difference between grade school, a grade in school, and the level of service ratings that DOT uses and relies on has to do with the gradation of delay that relates to the letter grade itself. Level of service D at a signalized location is a location where you would sustain less than 40 seconds of delay. Right. To go from a D to an E, right, there's a 10-second window of additional delay before you get to the next letter grade, right? So you might be introducing delay, let's say from C, which is a 30-second delay, to a D, which is 40. You might go from 30-second delay to 35 seconds of delay. You're still in the C category. You're still in that window, that 10-second window, before you trip and get into the level of service D category. So when I say there will be additional delay, of course there's more traffic, there will be additional delay, but the amount of traffic is generating delays that are 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds and still allow the letter grade designation to remain in the same designation because it hasn't tripped into the next letter.
So you have your A pluses.
Yeah.
There's
That's a good way to
versions.
think of it.
There's versions. I'm putting it into my level here, so
Sure.
there's versions of it. So you
That's
can
right.
you can still be a C, but you're a
C, C
C
plus,
pushing
C minus.
C pushing a D.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
That's right. A D, there's a whole science behind why those letter grades were assigned, right? There were federal studies that related to driver frustration, frankly, and the standards that were, in non-scientific terms, the standards that apply to level of service F, which is failing, have to do with a 60-second delay, because measured anxiety levels for folks to have to wait up to 1 minute of time became evident, right? So, and driver behavior changes as you become more anxious, right? So studies have all correlated levels of service to what are known as acceptable levels of service, and those were defined as level of service D or better, meaning a level of service of delay that wouldn't exceed a certain average of up to 49 seconds, right? And so is it more comfortable to travel through an intersection that's a B and it has 20 seconds of delay? Certainly. Is it really frustrating to have to wait through a level of service D? Not really, but as you get into an E or an F, it sure does. And you're more inclined to be 20th in line to get through the signal, and you may not get through the signal at E or D, E or an F.
Gotcha.
So what the D says is that most likely you're going to get through the signal when it does go green, even if you're the last one in line, right? And that's acceptable, right? It's not as good as a B or an A, but it's acceptable. And so what we're saying here is, in many cases, we're at Bs and As, Bs, or Cs, right? So we're not even at the D level. For the locations that are at the D level, that would be Lake Street to the east. The Oak Street intersection is at a C, right? Worst case. So it's not a location that, based on my response to prior public comment, it's not a location we're seeking to add capacity to. There's no inherent need to. It doesn't mean it can't be improved or made to be made more efficient. And there's a difference, right? And what we'll be talking to Mass DOT about as we're going into the access permit process is, okay, are there efficiencies that can be gained at the signal with simple changes, right? I know DOT has recently implemented what's called adaptive signal control out here. Again, a peer review comment, a very good comment, and we now have those updated plan sheets. Adaptive signal control involves controllers that adapt to traffic based on the amount of traffic that's happening so that it tries to balance the delays in a more efficient way when things get really busy. And we've built that into the analysis now, right? So we already know that the signals operate below capacity, but they're also operating under adaptive control, which means that at 8 in the morning, you might have a 90-second cycle, you know, and that works really well, but you might need a 95-second cycle in the evening, and you might need 10 more seconds on Route 9 for it to work efficiently. So the signal adjusts for that in real time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for bringing it to my level.
If I just want to add a little bit more color to the ABCDs, in the context of the way the planning field kind of looks at these, it's a little bit different from traffic engineers, and certainly if it's inappropriate, let me know. But, you know, when we look at those, you know, looking at gearing the appropriate, you know, I hate this scale because it looks like letter grades of what we're familiar in school. You really want to gear the traffic towards a safety standpoint and then kind of urban planning desire, to Tim's point about the experience of people driving in traffic. So a lot of times when we look at this, we see, you know, A is considered the free flow traffic, where on a Route 9 or one of your major thoroughfares is probably appropriate. But those high speeds and the free flow traffic where you have pedestrian interactions is not as appropriate. Whereas, you know, a C may be more appropriate. You have slower speeds, there's, you know, less of the frustration factor that Bob was talking about. So each intersection and each roadway, as you look at those, it's important to also consider that. And that's just a little different perspective of how we look at that, and right sizing essentially the roadway and the intersection flows to the context of that intersection, rather than just the delays themselves. But I just want to add that flavor for context.
That's helpful. Thank you. All right. That sparked a couple extra questions.
Good evening. My name is Damian Berthium. I'm an attorney at Berthium & Berthium. I represent Angela and Lee Mancini, who are at 110 Oak Street. Just first a question. I think on one of the first slides that you had, was there a daily trip total that was identified?
We do.
Daily new trip total, excuse me.
Through the chair. Yes, so this slide would show the net new daily trips, depending on whether it's a weekday or a Saturday. And the weekday daily new trips are 5,300 per day, and just under 6,000 on the Saturday.
Okay, so around just under 5,300 weekday.
Yeah, in the entirety, and that's for all uses. That doesn't represent a total that would be specific to just Route 9 or on Oak Street. It's distributed among those roadways.
Okay. In terms of the balance of tonight's meeting, it's my understanding that we're moving on to a different topic besides traffic. Is that correct?
I think that we're going to give Bowler an opportunity to do some discussion about site.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. All right. And is it anticipated that there'll be an opportunity for additional comment after that?
We're not planning on closing this here
Okay.
this
Then
evening.
I'll reserve the rest of my comments until after that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Oh, just one more, sorry. Go ahead.
Brian Lake, 108 Oak Street. Through the chair to Bob, just I'm not an educated man, so I need your help understanding a few things. When you're doing traffic studies, it seems as if you focus on counts of cars that are going on the various roadways that you're studying. Is that correct? And through intersections?
Through the chair. So we quantify pedestrian volumes, bicycle volumes, cars, certainly, and which direction cars are traveling. Yeah.
Do you study at all the experience of those persons that are in those vehicles that are going through those intersections and roads that you're studying? In other words, you talk about the impacts of cars, and it's not significantly increasing the amount of traffic based on whatever the new project is, this one or any other one that you're studying. But are you actually understanding what the experience is of those people that are sitting in those cars or traversing those roads, especially when it comes to intersections? So we talk about schools, we talk about the peak periods in the mornings and in the evenings, trying to get through those intersections. And so when cars are backed up to the top of the hill on Oak Street from Route 9, which is the one I'm most familiar with. I know there's a lot of traffic issues down on Maple Ave as well. But are you actually understanding how many traffic cycles it takes for somebody sitting halfway up the hill at the top of the hill? Do you take that into consideration in the overall assessment of the impact of additional traffic on those roadways?
Through the chair. So what we focus on are the periods of day when the highest combined level of impact occurs between the site and typically commuter travel. Weekday mornings, 7 to 9 in the morning, 4 to 6 in the evening. I understand very clearly that there are other periods of the day, particularly when schools are releasing, middle school, Montessori school, where there is a surge, an elevated period, usually over a 15 to 20 minute period, when you have a lot of traffic coming out of driveways onto Oak Street. I understand that. The objective of the traffic study and the basis for the traffic study is not to analyze, a 15, 20-minute period of time that might occur when a school releases. It's intended to look at the hours that have even higher volume conditions over a more extended period of time, which is the commuter periods that I mentioned, 7 to 9 and 4 to 6, and to understand the amount of delay and the amount of queuing that happens during those hours at the locations that we studied. And those relate to the levels of service that I just mentioned that provide a basis to determine, is that acceptable, is it not acceptable? So the driver experience has very much to do with delay, right? How long am I going to sit at this light before I can go through it? Can I get through it in a single cycle? And where am I in the line? Am I, the third car in the line, or am I the 10th car in the line? Or at 2:45, am I the 25th person in line for that very brief period when all hell breaks loose and the schools release? My earlier response to the board was, we understand that happens, right? My in-laws lived on Sherwood Avenue, right? So I dealt with that as well. I don't have to stand in a driveway to know that happens, because I've seen it and I've experienced it. I went to the junior high school, when it was off of Sherwood Avenue, right? And back then it was like that. What we're also saying is that the project itself, during that time of the day, 2:45 or so, when that happens, is generating probably the lowest amount of traffic that it will generate during the day. This type of a project is generating, for the residential components, people returning back to their homes before, and after during the commuter periods, mostly. And for some of the retail uses I mentioned earlier, may not even be open in the morning, or maybe generating higher levels of activity around lunchtime or dinner time, but not necessarily at 2:45. So we did not specifically call that out in the analysis. We know that it exists. It will exist independent of this independent of this project. Quite frankly, it's an issue that really goes beyond and is independent of the project. If there's a lot of queuing on Oak Street that happens at that time, that's a traffic management issue that has to do with the schools and not the project. Whether the project happens or not, it's a separate issue, and it's not something that we can solve. It is often solved by the management protocols that the school department establishes for how and when students are picked up, whether there's staggered pickup and arrivals. That applies to Montessori school as well, right? I design a lot of daycare centers in a lot of schools, and I develop traffic management plans that address those exact issues, right? Staggering of pickup and drop off, etc. Those are actions that exist beyond the realm of this project, and that this project is not going to solve.
It's not going to help it either. It's actually going to make it worse. And it's not just during school periods. It's going to happen as well during peak periods. It still takes, like I said, I live almost at the top of the hill. It takes me, when I leave for work in the morning, 3 to 4 cycles to get through down onto Route 9. So when you're measuring the delay, where do you measure it? Do you measure it at the first car? Do you measure it at the 15th car? Do you measure it at the 25th car? Because once you're in the line, you're in the line. It's going to take a while for it to empty out.
Sure, and through the chair, and that's why peer review happens on these types of projects, is to make sure that we're quantifying this properly. The way that traffic engineering works is that if you are fortunate enough to be the first person to get to a light, and to have it cycle quickly, your delay is going to be insignificant. If you're the last guy in line, you're going to have a much longer delay. The way that these letter grade ratings work is that it takes the average stopped delay for an approach to an intersection, right? It's going to balance, and it's going to say, okay, what's the average amount of time that you're stopped before you can proceed through the signal? For the first few folks that might have arrived at the very tail end of the red, and they go through really quick, they might have a 5-second delay. The guy in the back might have a 48-second delay, right? The average of those two is going to be a 20-second delay, right? So it's a way to say, on average, if you're traveling down Oak Street at 8 in the morning, on average, what's your average delay going to be? Sometimes you're going to be that first person that only has 5 seconds of delay, and other times you're going to be the guy that has the 48-second delay. But on average, you're going to experience 20 seconds of delay.
So at what point do you recommend something has to be done here to fix this?
Mm-hmm. And that's why DOT, through their access process, also asks the same question. Is the amount of average delay acceptable, right? And I mentioned that acceptable term, it's that D or better. If the analysis is saying that the average amount of delay is 20 or 30 or 40 seconds, that's considered acceptable. It doesn't mean that it's a perfect scenario. It doesn't mean that queuing doesn't happen, and it doesn't mean that at 2:45 it might create a 60-second delay for a 20-minute period. What it says is that for extended peak hour periods, the average amount of delay is considered acceptable, and those are documented in the traffic report, and those serve as the basis for determining whether or not it makes sense to retime a signal, add a signal, add a lane, and do other types of improvements. So what our studies have shown is that on average, the delays are acceptable, and there isn't a need to retime the signal necessarily. I mentioned, bless you, the signal is adaptive. It has brand new technology that allows it to adapt to situations. Not perfect, right? The way that works is it just doesn't magically add a ton of time to Oak Street when the schools release. It takes several cycles for it to kind of figure out, oh, Oak Street has a lot more volume on it, so I'm going to give Oak Street more time, and it does it incrementally. So you may experience in one day being 20th person coming down the hill with a long delay, and if you're fortunate enough, maybe 10 or 15 minutes later to have the same approach, you might only have 10 or 15 seconds of delay because the system caught up to itself and it corrected itself, but it didn't happen instantaneously. So that's the long explanation of what we're dealing with. We're not going to solve issues that might happen for brief periods of time when schools release. The signals are operating acceptably. If there are means to make them work more efficiently, those will be topics that we discuss with DOT during the access permit.
So just mirroring earlier comments too, while the cold statistics may not show that a right turn lane would benefit or is needed, it would from those of us that actually have to live in that space. It definitely would benefit. There's a lot of holdups with people trying to make the left turn and are waiting for traffic coming the other way from Oak Street and south up north, and it just backs everything up. And of course, when traffic's backed up, as we all know, current traffic issues or driving issues is half those people in line are on their phone and they're not even paying attention to when traffic starts moving again. So that just makes the delays even worse. So a second traffic lane to handle that right turn traffic onto Route 9, as well as give folks that are coming in from both the commercial property and the residential a lane to cleanly get onto Oak Street without having to cut into traffic or to cut somebody else off would definitely be beneficial, and in my opinion, would make things a lot cleaner down the bottom of the hill.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, at this point, I know it's getting to a later hour here. Tim, I don't know if you'd like to try and go through your presentation.
I can be brief. Bob did a great job of going through a lot of the updates, so I'll just give you a few others.
Sure.
Hold on a second here.
And I understand that we'll obviously be talking about this at a future hearing, so I'm not going to try and take everyone's time tonight too much. Quick update on the permitting side. With Concom, we had our initial meeting, which I think we talked about last hearing, and we've actually made some updates relative to feedback from the commission. We plan to be in front of them again this month on the 17th. We've also just recently engaged the wetland peer review with the commission, which we would hope to be walking the site with them in the next couple weeks and receiving their peer review comments. So that's a process that's ongoing. I guess I'll jump in. For the Graves peer review, we are finalizing our response to that and hope to have that well in advance of the next hearing for you to go through that in detail, similar to like Bob had done today. Just on the Conservation Commission changes, I think are one of the bigger things that Bob didn't hit on because it didn't quite need to with the traffic itself. But on the westerly side of the site, Mark's going to zoom in over here for us.
You want the computer?
Yeah, that'd be great. I don't need you to guess where I'm going.
Yeah, thanks. I got a good idea, but not mine.
It's not touched.
Yeah, sorry. It's
Old technology. All right.
does the trick.
So on the west side of the site, we had actually met with Concom, and we've actually pushed this entire westerly connector road between Route 9 and Maple Ave about 20 feet to the east in order to provide a larger buffer to the wetlands there. The entire kind of perimeter here of the New England Power site is wetlands. So move that those impacts very far away from the wetlands there. What that served to do was actually reduce some of the parking on Pad 8 and some of the parking on Pad 7. And then additionally, what we did was for the interior vegetated wetland here, which you kind of see in this treat area, we actually pulled the Pad 8 kind of southwest away from that, and the access drive in the back. Again, lost about 8 to 10 spaces in the grocer pad area to do that, but what that does is serves to actually pull the limits of disturbance outside of the existing disturbed limits. That's where the SPAG's rear of the building is. That'll provide a nice buffer and be able to retain that entire area, and that's why you see that in green here. Other than that, I think Bob went through a lot of the other changes that we've made here. The biggest thing obviously being the connectivity that we've kind of proposed throughout the site. We took a lot of steps to try and be able to knit together some of the connections. The newest connections here being coming off of Route 9 up into pads 1 through 4, being able to provide interconnection via some accessible ramping and walks up to pads 1 through 4 on the resi side, down to pads 1 through 4 on the retail side. You could also traverse that same set of paths all the way down to the resi pad 5, and even continue along and get yourself over to Maple Ave. Provides kind of a connection all the way from Maple Ave over to Oak Street via somewhat, any choices you kind of want. We acknowledge that those are a long distance. It's about 2,000 feet to go from one to the other, linearly, and you're going about 75 feet up in grade. So that's the reason it's so long, is somewhat to be accessible. But as we talked before, there's a lot of grade change here, and I know there was a comment from the public about, we could make a road here and grade it differently. The fact is that we've actually graded this in a way to very much try to mitigate cut fills, earthwork, the amount of trucking and work that has to go into the site work at the time. So we've kind of distinctly made these pads we talked about at certain elevations that really do try and balance the site as much as possible, and all that, trying to also balance the connectivity with the pedestrian access throughout the site. There's a few other path connections we've added, mainly the connection over to Maple Ave and the ability to get to other retailers going west, as well as some more kind of dedicated pedestrian access through the grocer pad that gets you back to connections all the way down to Route 9. So other than that, I think Bob did a great job of going through some of the changes. So I'm not sure there's a lot that I have to say beyond that, and happy to answer any more questions from the board or public as needed.
I do have a quick question on the 75-foot grade change.
Yep.
And the pedestrian walk, the ramp down. Are you constructing that walkway in an accessible manner so that it, because obviously, like, is it like ramped?
Yeah.
Way? Because I can see otherwise you'd probably need like a series of switchbacks.
Yeah, so what you're not seeing is kind of the grading that's dictating why the locations of these, paths are essentially following the contours along down these slopes. So it is a set of ramps and handrails and landings, all accessible all the way down from that upper to the lower. Where we can do walks that are under 5%, considered a walk under 88, we are doing that, but otherwise we're doing ramps with handrails.
Okay, thank you. Any board questions, comments? I know that we are going to also have some opportunity to discuss this a little bit further, but.
No questions from my side.
None further tonight.
Steve, do you have anything? Steve, do you have anything?
Not for now.
Okay.
I'm sure I'll have more.
Okay, great. I think this is helpful. I think this has been a very robust conversation this evening thus far. And I think that obviously this hearing is going to be continued to the next meeting. Chris, I don't recall what our schedule is in terms of what is next on our list of items to go through, but.
Yeah, so I think next would be some additional kind of site design and that, as well as I think we were going to talk about community benefits as well.
Yep, architecture.
And some of that, so.
Okay. So at this point, I thank you for your presentation this evening. I'd like to entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to the May 7th meeting. Is there?
At 7 p.m.
I'm sorry?
At 7 p.m.
I'm sorry, at 7 p.m., yes, thank you. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to continue the meeting.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, Dino?
Yes.
Perna?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I am a yes.
Thank you.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thanks.
Next item on the agenda is zoning warrant article for the annual town meeting. This is a new public hearing.
I'll read the legal notice. In accordance with the provisions of MGL Chapter 40A, Section 5, the Shrewsbury Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, April 2nd, 2026 at 7 p.m. in the Select Board Meeting Room at the Richard D. Carney Municipal Office Building, 100 Maple Avenue, Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, regarding proposed amendments to the Shrewsbury zoning bylaw as follows. Article, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Shrewsbury, Section 6, Table 1, by removing reference to, quote, summer houses, end quote, and amend Section 7, Y, H in parentheses, accessory dwelling units to allow accessory dwelling units in the front yard only in instances where such location requirements would conflict with state law or to take any other action in relation thereto. The complete text, where applicable, may be seen during regular business hours in the Office of the Planning and Economic Development Department, the Office of the Town Clerk, at the Municipal Office Building at 100 Maple Avenue, and the Shrewsbury Public Library at 609 Main Street.
Thank you. Given the hour, and I think I spoke to this a little bit at the last meeting, I'll keep it fairly brief. This article for a town meeting is primarily a cleanup article. We're looking at two substantial changes being proposed. The first is the removal of the summer houses phrase, which exists in our Table 1, Table of Uses. In a accessory use definition, that use primarily is no longer necessary, especially given the new ADU section of the bylaw. So it's really, there's no other reference to it anywhere else in the bylaw, but we've seen some confusion from people who are looking at ADUs, trying to understand how that might apply to their property. So the easiest way to resolve that in our mind is to remove that antiquated reference in the definition. In addition to that, the other modification that this article would achieve is related to the Attorney General's review and recommendations related to the previous ADU bylaw. So out of that Attorney General's review, a number of items were amended to align them with state law. One that remained was a recommendation to review the bylaw specifically in relation to that provision that's cited and how the Dover protections essentially apply to ADUs. We did review that with town council, and we found that there was a way to clarify the language, essentially to preclude any, misinterpretation by a future board or misreading. So it provides additional clarification that in instances where an ADU would be prohibited, the board, cannot outright prohibit that ADU with the front yard setbacks. So everything else would remain intact. This just takes that recommendation and codifies it to provide legal clarification for future boards.
But the normal setback requirements would still apply?
Correct.
Right, okay. In other words, they would have to meet the normal, whether it's front, side, or rear.
Correct. So all the setbacks and everything need to still meet, but in terms of locating it.
Yeah.
So there are some, some instances such as a corner lot would be one of them where they have no rear yard, and so the board would not be able to use that as a way to deny an ADU outright. They would be allowed to put it on the side or located in the front yard, but still compliant with setbacks. So.
Okay. Is there any questions or comments from the board on this?
No questions from my side.
Steve, do you have anything?
Nothing.
This is a public hearing, so is there any member of the public wishing to speak on these items this evening? So I guess the question is, Chris, are we essentially voting to send these to the selectmen to be placed on the warrant?
Yeah, so they've been sent to the select board, they've been placed on the warrant. This would satisfy the public hearing process. Traditionally, the board waits until the next meeting. We hold 2 public hearings, just to ensure that there's public comment.
For sure.
I do have a recommendation prepared, if the board so chooses to vote this evening. That would be, it's a simple kind of standard letter that goes to town meeting members that notes the board's vote. But again, traditionally, we do hold the 2 public hearings, but I defer to the board. Obviously, this is a less substantive article than usual.
I mean, given the, not, this isn't, in my personal opinion, not overly controversial. I don't see a need to hold it into 2 hearings if other members of the board are in agreement.
Yeah, I'm fine holding it for the second.
Why don't we just recommend it to town meeting?
Okay. All right, so I'd like to entertain a motion to close the public hearing on these warrant articles.
I move that we close the public hearing for the zoning warrant article.
Is all those in favor, Matt?
I'm in favor.
Dino?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So at this point, we need to now take a vote on recommending this warrant article to town meeting. Is that the correct language to use? All right, so is there a motion to send this warrant article to town meeting?
Yeah, I move that we send this zoning warrant article to the annual town meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, Matt?
Aye.
Dino?
Yes.
Perna?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Okay. Excellent. Next item on the agenda, discuss and deliberate the decision for 33 and 35 Redland Road special permit. We've all received that, that decision. Is there any questions, comments, concerns on that decision from the board?
No questions from my side.
I don't have any.
No questions.
No question.
Is there a motion to vote on the, I guess we need to take a vote on this particular decision. So is there a motion to vote on this?
I make a motion.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, Matt?
Yes.
Dino?
Yes.
Perna?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
I am a yes as well, so passes unanimously. Next item, discuss and deliberate on the decision for 0 Greenbrier Drive subdivision modification. Is there any items the board wishes to discuss further prior to voting on this item this evening?
Yes. Just one. The Vice Chairman made a comment on this matter at the last hearing on this. And it had something to do about the nature and intent of the original decision, and then the applicant coming back requesting these additional lots. And I was just looking for a little clarification on that, if we could. If what I'm asking even makes sense.
Are you asking?
You
for
asking me?
Yeah.
From the vice chair?
Okay, from my perspective, when we considered the entirety of these two sites. They were clearly identified on the application, the two tax parcels. And when we looked at the traffic, there was this double barrel road. We gave them a waiver on the length. We were concerned about the density and the grading. I know my former colleagues, Mr. Boulay, who was the chair, and Mr. Thomas, who was the clerk, had concerns about all of that, and that 48 units was going to be the max from this site. I know that, they contend that, we only showed you the length of the portion that was going to be the age-restricted development, but that wasn't the case. Again, I'm not slighting Mr. Ricker or Mr. Grenier, who I'm friendly with, but that just was not the way it occurred. The intent, I believe, of the board, the prior board, was that you got 48 units out of the entirety of the site. Had they presented this at the time, and I don't know, because they didn't, had they come in this way, I'm guessing we would have looked to chop 3 or 4 units from the age-restricted portion of the project. Mr. Boulay and Mr. Thomas felt pretty strongly about it, and I did too, and they needed a 4-to-1 vote. They got unanimous, and it was negotiated between the prior developer and the board. 48 units, that was it. So I feel kind of strongly about it, but hey, if the rest of the board thinks it's okay, I'm not going to vote for it, but so be it.
All right. Thanks for clarifying.
Any other members of the board? All right. Is there a motion to vote on this item this evening? Someone want to make the motion?
I make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Could you just clarify what
Sure.
the motion is?
A
Motion
motion to,
approve?
yes, motion to approve.
Thank you.
Are we modifying the special permit too? Because I think that is a necessary component.
This is,
So this would be, correct, this would be to modify the subdivision approval.
Okay.
for
But the
addi-
special permit referenced both sites, so I think it necessitates a motion to amend the special permit.
not the sub,
The application before the board this evening is a modification of the subdivision, not of the special permit. But you're correct that both sites were referenced within both of those applications.
So I don't see how Ms. Sheehan's gonna issue any more building permits until the applicant brings forward a motion, an application to modify the special permit for the age-restricted component of the project, the new project.
so is,
Can
so,
we then put it on hold until that application is filed, or how does it?
The public hearing is closed, so we do have the 90-day shot clock to render a decision. So I believe we would potentially have one more meeting to hit that, but that probably would not line up with the application and
so if
getting
we
through the
took a vote on this evening, essentially nothing else can occur on this.
on the
Until-
subdivision side, so this wouldn't affect the current special permit. The current over 55 would proceed as approved currently. but-
Sure, but they would still, for this portion, they would still need to come in and modify the special permit. So we can vote on this tonight, but at some point, the
Correct.
next
My
step is going
understanding
to
if-
be
if
for them
this
to
wa-
do
If this
the
was
special-
approved, then an additional modification of the
Understood.
special permit for the over 55 may also be required.
But that's not obvious as part of this approval. We are not saying, at least in this draft anywhere, that this in itself would not allow them to go ahead. They need to go through the other permitting process.
So there would have to be a modification to the language that says, in the event that this is approved, there would be a requirement to go back and modify the special permit.
Correct, yeah, so this would modify the language in the subdivision decision, which requires the applicant to return to the board for the additional split of the lots, for those 3 additional lots that are being proposed. And what Mr. Rolikis is, I believe, alluding to is that the special permit also would need a modification to unlock those 3 for building permits as they're included in that over 55. So they would need the additional modification of the special permit to modify the number of units permitted under that project.
Understood. So
they'll need approvals for both to proceed with the 3 additional
So
lots.
the question is, can we modify this decision to include that language
As a condition.
as a condition?
I see, as a condition, yes, that can be added. Yep.
Okay. Does that make sense
Yes.
to the board?
Sorry, it would be as a finding rather than as a condition, so you would note that the,
Sure.
So therefore,
That doesn't make sense to me because I'm voting no, but, okay.
So would this have to be redrafted for us to vote?
I don't think so, as long as we are. in
So I
agreement
can
with
add that, I would add that in as a finding for the item that's signed, but the decision would be as drafted. An additional finding would be added that, that the applicant is required to also modify the, special permit, and we would reference that permit number, which I
Okay.
don't have in front of me, but, in order to, render those units, those lots buildable.
Yeah.
So let's walk this through for a minute. Say they come forward and we deny the modification.
So then they would have been approved for the split of the lots, but not for the additional units. So they would be non-buildable lots.
And Steve, there was a strongly worded letter from Attorney Ricker back in December of 2025 that essentially appeared to a layperson like myself like this was a done deal, that he didn't even really need to come and seek the board's permission to do this.
That would be wrong. Go look at the way the decision, the way the application was filed and the decision was written. It's pretty clear that the entirety of the site was included.
Yeah, and therefore they had to come back to seek permission.
I believe so. You know, Richard may disagree, and again, I'm not slighting his legal acumen or John's ability. John did a good job getting this approved for 48 units, but that was it. It was negotiated. That was it. In my opinion. Yeah. I don't know. Chris, you were there too. I don't know. Is that your recollection, Chris?
So, correct, I don't
want to put you in the middle, but.
No, my interpretation of that, condition, from the start has been that the board wanted not necessarily to preclude additional lots, but to have that option. So whereas, if that condition wasn't included, perhaps it could have been A&R'd, but in this case, the board deliberately put that condition in to make sure that any additional lots would have to come before them for consideration. So, I think the board is deliberating on that currently, and what they decide this evening would be, binding upon that.
In that case, would it be okay if at this point of time we don't make this decision, but after the meeting, in the next couple of days, you get, I mean, the way I'm looking at it is, so far the applicant did not know that they have to file special permit modification, or we haven't told them either. So in which case, if we can tell them now that the board feels you need to file this special permit modification, then maybe prior to next meeting they may file, and then if at that point of time we have to vote on this, and following that in another meeting we have to vote on that. That's something that at least in the interim we can decide based on how the rest of the board and you feel. At least that way we have given the applicant an opportunity of this new development in terms of their filing requirements. Again, that's just my opinion.
I don't think they can say they were blindsided, because I raised it at the initial hearing, and at some point, it appeared as an agenda item, modification of a special permit, if you go look at some of the old agendas. Hold it, I think you hold it a month, it
Yeah.
doesn't harm anybody, but,
It sounds like we
you
said-
got,
Yeah.
it's not gonna, my opinion is not gonna change in a month, but
It sounds like we could benefit from holding this decision, the vote on this decision, to kind of make sure that we have all of our items in order. Is there?
And
agreement on
I'll
that?
be there,
Yeah,
actually, in
Will you
in
be
May.
here for that? All right, so perhaps we can just table this, a vote on this decision until the May 7th meeting? Is there agreement on that?
Yes.
We don't need to take a vote on that to table the decision. We don't need to take a vote on not taking a vote, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right, so we'll just hold that for our next meeting. Next item is to discuss and deliberate on the decision for 308 and 312 Boston Turnpike. There is one for site plan approval and one for the special permit. So why don't we take site plan approval first? Is there any questions, comments, concerns on the decision from board members on this?
No questions.
My only comment would be, after picking on poor Richard and John at the prior deliberation, I think that they did a good job in getting their client to come around to a project that I think is palatable and kind of acceptable for that site and that. So, and I think the developer recognized the shortcomings of the initial submission, and to the developers, and to their credit, worked on the aesthetics, worked on increasing the commercial component of the project, and it's not the best mixed-use project, but when you look at others, at least you're getting 6,000 or 7,000 square feet of commercial space for 30 something units of residential. If you go do the math on some others, it certainly, the ratios are better. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Steve. Anybody else?
No.
All right, can I entertain a motion to approve the site plan approval for 308, 312 Boston Turnpike? Matt?
This one I can't vote on.
Oh, apologies, sorry.
Sorry.
I make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
So Dino?
Yes.
Perna?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I am a yes. So site plan approval is adopted. Next is the, for the decision for the special permit for 308 and 312 Boston Turnpike. Is there a motion to accept this decision for the special permit for 308, 312? Is there?
Yes. I move that we approve the special permit for 308, 312 Boston Turnpike.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, Dino?
Yes.
Perna?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, excellent. Next item, lot release request at Cypress Ridge.
Yes, so this is a request for an additional 5 units at the Cypress Ridge development off of Greenbrier Street. Just this morning, we did receive the pressure flow test at the top of the hill for this project, which appears to be in order. We also did receive the fee in lieu payment for those additional 5 units to be released just the other day as well. So with those 2 items, those are the requirements for the release of additional lots, and we recommend approval of that.
Okay, so is there any questions, comments from the board on this matter?
No question, Chair.
No questions.
This is independent, of course, of 0 Greenbrier Drive?
Correct. This is for the project as currently.
Okay.
This isn't the last 5 units, because that
It is
way
not, no.
have been controversial.
But this would be in a butter to that parcel?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so is there a motion to allow for the lot release request at Cypress Ridge for 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18 Conifer Circle?
Make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, Matt?
Yes.
Dino,
Yes.
Erna,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Thank you.
We do not have any A&R plans
None this
before us this evening, so just note that there was some correspondence that was received for the first application that we had this evening, 66, 67, et cetera, et cetera. So that is noted. So seeing nothing else on our agenda this evening, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? I don't think we need to
Aye.
recall that.
Aye.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
See you in May.
Thanks, Steve.
In person, Steve.
Please bring.
Person.